When Elena Moore collapsed on that frozen sidewalk, 8 months pregnant and penniless, she didn't know the surveillance cameras belonged to the one man she'd spent 2 years trying to forget. Her ex-husband, Marco DeLuca, the most dangerous crime boss in the city. He'd divorced her to save her life. Instead, he'd destroyed it. Now, as his men carried her unconscious body into his penthouse, the baby she carried, his daughter, was about to shatter every wall he'd built between protection and love. One night would unravel 2 years of lies. One truth would ignite a war. If you're ready to dive into Elena and Marco's story of survival, secrets, and second chances, stay with me until the end. And don't forget to hit that like button and comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Sit. The cold bit through Elena's threadbare coat like teeth. She'd stopped feeling her fingers an hour ago, stopped feeling much of anything except the persistent ache in her lower back and the weight pressing against her ribcage. 8 months of consequence. 8 months of a secret she carried alone through Detroit's merciless winter. The bus stop bench offered no relief. Elena lowered herself carefully, one hand braced against the graffitied shelter, the other cradling the swell of her belly. Her last shift at the diner had run 4 hours over. Sheila called in sick again, and Elena couldn't afford to say no to the extra tables, the extra tips that barely covered the weekly motel room that smelled of mildew and defeat. She'd eaten today. A piece of toast at 6 in the morning, some crackers a customer left behind around 2. Her stomach had stopped growling weeks ago, replaced by a constant hollow sensation that made her dizzy when she stood too quickly. The baby moved less now. Elena told herself that was normal, that babies slept, that everything was fine. Everything was not fine. 2 years ago, she'd been Elena DeLuca, wife of Marco DeLuca, living in a penthouse that overlooked the city like a kingdom. She'd had everything: security, comfort, a man who looked at her like she was the only light in his dark world. Then one morning, she'd woken to divorce papers on the breakfast table and Marco's cold voice telling her it was over, that she needed to leave, that staying with him would get her killed. She'd believed the killed part. She'd seen enough in their 18 months of marriage to know Marco's world ran on blood and bullets, that his enemies were vicious and his allies were worse. What she hadn't understood was that leaving him would be its own kind of death, slower, quieter, but just as final. The divorce had been fast, brutally efficient. She'd signed papers she barely read, too shocked to fight, too hurt to argue. Marco's lawyer had handed her a check, a substantial one, and told her to start over, somewhere far from Detroit, somewhere safe. She'd tried. She'd lasted 3 months in a small town in Ohio, working at a library, living in a modest apartment, jumping at every shadow. Then the money ran out faster than she'd planned. Turned out she was terrible at budgeting when she'd never had to budget before. And the isolation became suffocating. She'd missed the city, missed the noise, missed feeling like she was part of something larger than her own grief. So she'd come back to Detroit. Different neighborhood, different name. She'd reclaimed her maiden name Moore. Like she could shed DeLuca like a skin that no longer fit. She'd found work at the diner, found the motel, found a way to survive that felt more like drowning in slow motion. Then she'd found out about the baby. 2 pink lines on a gas station pregnancy test, her hands shaking so hard she'd almost dropped it in the toilet. She'd done the math 3 times, 4 times, tracing back through her calendar to that last night with Marco, the night before the divorce papers, when he'd made love to her with something that felt like desperation, like goodbye. She should have told him. That's what reasonable people would say. But reasonable people didn't understand what it meant to be divorced by Marco DeLuca. It meant he'd made a decision, a final one, and Marco's decisions were absolute. He'd cut her out to save her, and dragging him back in would only put them all in danger. Besides, what could he offer? Money she was too proud to take? Protection that came with strings attached to a world she'd been glad to escape? A marriage he'd already declared over? No. Elena had decided to handle this alone, the way she handled everything now. She worked double shifts until her feet swelled and her back screamed. She ate every third meal and told herself the baby was getting what she needed. She ignored the dizzy spells, the way her vision sometimes sparked at the edges, the persistent exhaustion that felt like her bones were turning to sand. Tonight, the exhaustion was winning. The bus was late. 18 minutes now, according to the cracked screen of her phone, a prepaid model she'd bought at a pawn shop, Nothing like the sleek device Marco had given her, the one she'd left on the penthouse counter like all the other pieces of that life. Elena's head felt strange, heavy, and light at the same time. The street light above the bus stop flickered, casting shadows that seemed to move independently. She blinked hard, trying to clear her vision, but the shadows multiplied, dancing at the periphery. She needed to eat, needed to sleep, needed to get to the motel and collapse on the sagging mattress and hope she'd feel better in the morning. The baby kicked, a weak flutter against her ribs. Elena pressed her hand against the spot, willing strength into that tiny life. "Almost there," she whispered. "Just hang on." But she wasn't sure if she was talking to the baby or herself. The cold intensified, or maybe that was just her body giving up its fight to stay warm. Elena's teeth chattered. She pulled her coat tighter, but there wasn't enough fabric, wasn't enough of anything. The world tilted slightly, the bus stop bench sliding sideways in her vision. She gripped the edge of the seat, trying to anchor herself. A car passed, its headlights too bright, searing across her retinas. Then another. The street was busy for this time of night, or maybe she was losing time, losing her grip on the sequence of moments that connected to form something coherent. "Miss, you okay?" The voice came from far away. Elena tried to focus, tried to locate the source. A woman stood a few feet back, concern etched across her features. Older, maybe 60, with kind eyes that reminded Elena of the grandmother she'd lost in college. "I'm fine," Elena said automatically. The words came out slurred, wrong. "You don't look fine, honey. You need me to call someone?" Call someone. The concept was almost funny. There was no one to call. Her parents had died in a car accident when she was 23. She'd been an only child. Her friends, the few she'd had before Marco, had drifted away during the marriage, unable to reconcile the Elena they knew with the woman who'd married into darkness. And after the divorce, she'd been too ashamed to reach out, too proud to admit she was failing at the fresh start they'd probably assumed she'd make. "No one to call," Elena managed. "Just waiting for the bus." The woman's frown deepened. She stepped closer, and Elena saw her more clearly. The worn coat, the grocery bags clutched in both hands, the wariness of someone who'd lived in this city long enough to know when to help and when to walk away. "That bus ain't coming tonight," the woman said. "Heard it on the radio. Driver shortage. Route canceled after 9. You got another way home?" The words registered slowly, filtering through the fog in Elena's brain. No bus. No way home. The motel was 43 blocks north, a walk that would take hours she didn't have, energy that didn't exist. "I'll call a cab," Elena said, though she knew her bank account couldn't cover the fare. "You sure? You look like you're about to—" Elena didn't hear the rest. The world inverted, the ground rushing up or the sky falling down. She couldn't tell which. Her knees buckled, her hands reaching for something to catch her fall, finding only air. The impact never came. Instead, there was a strange suspension, a moment of floating, and then darkness crashed over her in a wave that drowned out sound, sight, sense. The last thing Elena registered was the baby's weak kick against her ribs and the distant, terrified voice of the older woman shouting for help. Then, nothing. The first thing Elena became aware of was warmth. It suffused her body, chasing away the bone-deep cold that had become her constant companion. She was lying on something soft, not the concrete sidewalk, not the lumpy motel mattress, but something else entirely. Clean sheets whispered against her skin. The scent in the air was familiar, achingly so, a combination of expensive cologne and something uniquely masculine that she'd spent 2 years trying to forget. No, it wasn't possible. Elena's eyes flew open. The ceiling above her was high, decorated with crown molding she'd once studied for hours while lying in bed, too content to move. The walls were the same soft gray she remembered. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Detroit's skyline glittered against the night sky, a view she'd know anywhere. She was in Marco's penthouse, in his bed. Panic surged through her, sharp and clarifying. Elena sat up too quickly, her vision swimming with the sudden movement. Her hand immediately went to her belly, checking, confirming. The baby was still there, still safe, still moving with those weak flutters that had become normal. But everything else was wrong. She was wearing different clothes, soft cotton, not the grease-stained uniform from the diner. Someone had changed her, cleaned her, put her in Marco's bed. The violation of it mixed with a horrible relief because she was warm and safe, and the mattress didn't smell like mildew. "You're awake." Elena's head snapped toward the voice. Marco stood in the doorway, leaning against the frame with deceptive casualness. But there was nothing casual about the way he looked at her, his dark eyes tracking every movement, every breath, with an intensity that made her feel simultaneously exposed and protected. He looked the same, older maybe, harder around the edges, but still undeniably Marco. Tall, broad-shouldered, moving with the controlled grace of a man who'd been trained to fight and trained to win. His dark hair was slightly longer than she remembered, curling at his collar. He wore a black shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, revealing forearms roped with muscle and marked with scars she'd traced with her fingers in another lifetime. "What?" Elena's voice came out hoarse. She swallowed, tried again. "What happened?" "You collapsed." Marco's voice was controlled, each word measured. "At the bus stop on 7th and Monroe. My men were running surveillance in the area, routine sweep. They saw you go down, called it in. I had them bring you here." The explanation was smooth, practiced. Too smooth. Elena's mind, still sluggish, tried to work through the implications. Marco's men just happened to be running surveillance at the exact bus stop where she'd collapsed, in a city of hundreds of neighborhoods? "You've been watching me." It wasn't a question. Something flickered across Marco's face, guilt maybe, or defiance. "I've been keeping tabs, making sure you were safe." "Safe?" The word came out sharp, bitter. Elena threw back the covers, swinging her legs over the side of the bed. Her body protested the movement, but rage was an excellent motivator. "You think I'm safe? You think living in a motel that rents by the week, working myself half to death for tips, skipping meals so I can save enough for prenatal vitamins, you think that's safe?" She was standing now, though her legs trembled with the effort. Marco moved forward instinctively, reaching to steady her, but Elena jerked back from his touch. "Don't," she said. "You don't get to touch me. You don't get to pretend you care. You divorced me, Marco. You made that choice. To protect you." His voice was rough now, the control slipping. "Everything I did was to protect you." "Well, congratulations." Elena gestured at herself, at the obvious swell of her pregnancy, at the way her wrists looked too thin, her face too gaunt. "You protected me right into hell." Marco's eyes dropped to her belly. She watched the realization hit him, watched his expression transform from guarded to shocked to something she couldn't name. "You're pregnant." His voice was barely above a whisper. Brilliant observation. "How far along?" 8 months. She saw him do the math, the same math she'd done 100 times. 8 months meant conception around the time of their divorce. 8 months meant the baby was his. Marco's face went white, then red, emotions battling across his features too fast to track. He took a step back, then another, like the knowledge was a physical blow. "Why didn't you tell me?" Each word sounded torn from him. "Tell you?" Elena laughed, a hollow sound. "You served me with divorce papers and told me to leave the city. You made it very clear you wanted me out of your life. What was I supposed to do? Call you up and say, 'Hey, I know you're done with me, but surprise, you're going to be a father?'" "Yes!" The word exploded from him. "That's exactly what you should have done." "Why?" Elena demanded. "So you could throw money at me, send one of your men to make sure I took care of it, offer to set me up somewhere far away where I wouldn't be an inconvenience?" "So I could take care of you," Marco shouted. Then quieter, devastated, "So I could protect you both." The silence that followed was suffocating. They stared at each other across the expanse of the bedroom, 2 years of hurt and misunderstanding between them like a chasm. Finally, Elena spoke, her voice tired. "I don't want your protection, Marco. That's what got us into this mess in the first place." "Elena? No." She held up her hand. "You made your choice. You decided I'd be better off without you, without this life. And maybe you were right. Maybe being married to you would have gotten me killed. But being divorced from you almost killed me anyway, so what was the point?" She was crying now, hot tears tracking down her cheeks. Marco moved toward her again, and this time she was too exhausted to pull away. He caught her as her knees buckled, lowering them both to the floor, cradling her against his chest while she sobbed. "I'm sorry," he murmured into her hair. "I'm so sorry. I thought I was doing the right thing. There were threats, Elena. Credible threats against you. The Vittorio family was making moves, and they'd identified you as a weakness. I thought if you were gone, if we were divorced, they'd leave you alone." "Did they?" Elena asked bitterly. "I don't know. I had men watching you, but from a distance. I knew you were working, knew you were struggling, but I thought—" His voice broke. "I thought you'd use the settlement money. I thought you'd be okay." "I was too proud to use your money," Elena said. "And it ran out anyway. Turns out I'm not very good at being poor." Marco's arms tightened around her. "You shouldn't have to be good at it. You should have called me." "I couldn't." Elena pulled back enough to look at him. "You don't understand. When you ended things, it wasn't just the marriage, it was everything. I lost myself in you, Marco. I became someone I didn't recognize. And when you threw me out, I didn't throw you out. That's what it felt like." She wiped at her tears. "It felt like you decided I wasn't worth the trouble. That keeping me safe meant getting rid of me." Marco's jaw clenched. "It was the hardest thing I've ever done. Walking away from you nearly destroyed me." "Then why did you do it?" "Because loving you was selfish." The words came out raw, honest. "My world is violent, Elena. People die. The families I do business with, the enemies I've made, they don't follow rules. They would have used you to get to me. They would have hurt you in ways I can't even say out loud. And I couldn't—" His voice cracked. "I couldn't watch that happen. I couldn't be the reason you suffered." Elena studied his face, seeing the truth in every line. Marco had always been good at hiding his emotions, at presenting the cold, controlled exterior that made him dangerous. But right now he was laid bare, and what she saw there was pain that matched her own. "So instead you let me suffer alone," she said quietly. The accusation hung between them. Marco closed his eyes, his face contorting with something that looked like agony. "I didn't know about the baby," he said finally. "I swear to you, Elena, if I'd known—" "What? What would you have done differently?" He opened his eyes, and the intensity in them stole her breath. "Everything. I would have done everything differently." A knock on the door interrupted them. Marco's expression immediately shuddered, the vulnerability disappearing behind the mask Elena knew so well. "What?" he called out, his voice sharp. The door opened to reveal a man Elena recognized, Vincent, Marco's second in command. He was shorter than Marco, stocky, with cold blue eyes that had always made her nervous. He nodded at Elena with what might have been respect, then focused on Marco. "We've got a situation," Vincent said. "The Vittorio family knows she's here." Elena felt Marco's body tense against hers. "How?" "Street cameras. They've got people monitoring traffic near all your properties. Her arrival was flagged." "How long do we have?" "Hard to say. Could be hours, could be days. But they know, boss, and they'll move eventually." Marco was silent for a moment, his mind clearly racing through scenarios and strategies. Then he nodded. "Double the security. No one gets within 3 blocks of this building without clearance. And Vincent—" He paused. "Find out who leaked our surveillance locations. Someone told them where to look." Vincent's expression darkened. "You think we've got a rat?" "I think we've had one for a while, and this is confirmation. Handle it." "Consider it done." Vincent glanced at Elena again. "Good to see you, Mrs. DeLuca." "It's more now," Elena said automatically. Vincent's smile was thin. "Not for long, I'd wager." He left, closing the door behind him. Elena pulled away from Marco, struggling to her feet. This time he helped her, his hands gentle on her arms. "I need to leave," she said. "If me being here puts you in danger." "You're not going anywhere," Marco's voice was firm. "You heard Vincent. They already know you're here. Leaving now would just make you an easier target." "But—" "No." He cupped her face in his hands, forcing her to meet his eyes. "I let you go once, and look what happened. You almost died tonight, Elena. You and our daughter almost died because I was too much of a coward to fight for you." "We don't know it's a girl," Elena said weakly. A ghost of a smile crossed Marco's face. "It's a girl. I can feel it. Despite everything, Elena felt her own lips twitch. That's not how biology works. I don't care. His thumbs stroked her cheeks, wiping away the last of her tears. Boy or girl, that baby is mine. You are mine. And I don't care what threats exist or what wars I have to fight. I'm not losing you again. The declaration should have angered her, should have triggered all her defenses about being owned, about being treated like property. But the way Marco said it, the fierce protectiveness in his voice, didn't feel like possession. It felt like promise. I'm not the same person you married, Elena said. The last 2 years changed me. Good, Marco said. The woman I married was too afraid to push back, too willing to let me make all the decisions. I need you stronger than that now. I need a partner, not a possession. Is that what I'd be? Your partner? If you'll have me. His hands dropped to her shoulders. I know I don't deserve another chance. I know I hurt you, but I'm asking anyway. Stay. Help me figure this out. We'll do it differently this time. No more secrets. No more decisions made in isolation. We face this together. Elena wanted to say yes. Every part of her that had loved this man, that had mourned the loss of him, wanted to lean into the safety he offered. But safety was an illusion, and she'd learned that lesson the hardest way possible. What about the Vittorio family? She asked. What about all the other threats you were trying to protect me from? We handle them. Marco's voice was cold now, dangerous. Together. You learn to protect yourself. I teach you how this world works. No more sheltering you from reality. You get the truth, all of it, and you help me make decisions. And if I can't handle it, if the truth is too much, then we figure that out too. He stepped closer, his forehead resting against hers. But I don't think you'll break, Elena. I think you're stronger than either of us realized. You survived 2 years alone, pregnant, with nothing. That takes a kind of strength I didn't give you credit for. The admission cost him, she could tell. Marco wasn't a man who admitted mistakes easily. The fact that he was doing it now, that he was laying himself bare, meant something. I need time, Elena said. To think, to process. Take all the time you need. Marco kissed her forehead gently. But you take it here, where you're safe, where I can make sure you're eating properly and seeing a doctor and not collapsing on frozen sidewalks. Elena almost smiled. Bossy. Always. He pulled back to look at her. Are you hungry? When's the last time you ate? This morning. Toast. Marco's expression turned thunderous. Toast? You're 8 months pregnant, and you've had toast. It's what I could afford. That ends now. He guided her back to the bed, settling her against the pillows with a gentleness that contradicted his obvious fury. You stay here. I'm having food brought up, and tomorrow we're seeing my doctor. Marco, not negotiable, Elena. His voice was firm. You want partnership? Fine. But some things I get to be bossy about, and your health is one of them. She should argue, should establish boundaries, make it clear she wouldn't be ordered around. But the bed was soft, and she was so tired, and the idea of someone else making decisions for just a little while was seductive. Fine, she conceded. But this doesn't mean I'm agreeing to anything else. I'm still deciding. Fair enough. Marco headed for the door, then paused. For what it's worth, I never stopped loving you, not for a single day. He left before she could respond, which was probably good because Elena didn't know what to say. Her emotions were a tangled mess, anger and relief and fear and hope all competing for dominance. She looked around the bedroom, cataloging the changes. The photographs of them were gone, probably removed after the divorce. But everything else was the same, like the room had been waiting for her return. The baby kicked, stronger this time, and Elena pressed her hand to the spot. What do you think? She whispered. Should we trust him? The baby kicked again, which Elena chose to interpret as optimism. 20 minutes later, Marco returned with a tray laden with food, soup, bread, fruit, cheese, chocolate. Enough to feed 3 people. He set it on the bed beside her and watched as she ate, his eyes tracking every bite like he was memorizing the sight. When did you last eat? Elena asked between spoonfuls of soup. This morning. Then share this with me. There's too much for one person. Marco hesitated, then grabbed a piece of bread, tearing off chunks and eating them mechanically. They sat in companionable silence, the act of sharing a meal feeling both familiar and strange after so much time apart. I need to know what I'm walking into, Elena said finally. If I stay, and I'm not saying I am, I need to understand the threats. All of them. Marco nodded slowly. Okay, but not tonight. Tonight you rest. Tomorrow we talk about everything, the Vittorio family, the business, the risks. I'll give you the full picture, and you decide if you can live with it. And if I can't? His jaw tightened. Then we figure out an alternative. But Elena, I meant what I said. I'm not letting you go back to that motel. Whatever happens between us, you and the baby are my responsibility. We're not your responsibility, Elena said quietly. We're your family. There's a difference. Something in Marco's expression softened. You're right. You are my family. The only family that matters. Elena finished the soup, the warmth spreading through her body like medicine. Her eyelids were growing heavy, the exhaustion she'd been fighting for months finally catching up with her. Sleep, Marco said, taking the tray. I'll be right down the hall if you need anything. You're not staying? The question slipped out before she could stop it. Marco's eyes darkened with something that looked like longing. Do you want me to? Elena should say no, should establish distance, maintain boundaries. But the bed was big, and she was tired, and the thought of sleeping alone after everything felt unbearable. Just to sleep, she said. Nothing else? Just to sleep, Marco agreed. He disappeared into the bathroom, emerging a few minutes later in sleep pants and a t-shirt. He slid into bed beside her, maintaining careful distance, not touching. But his presence was warm and solid, and Elena found herself relaxing in a way she hadn't in years. Marco? She whispered into the darkness. Yeah? Thank you for finding me, for bringing me here. His hand found hers under the covers, their fingers intertwining. I should have found you sooner. Should have been watching closer. I'm sorry it took you collapsing for me to act. We both made mistakes, Elena said. Yeah. His thumb stroked across her knuckles. But we get to fix them now. Together. Elena closed her eyes, letting herself believe it might be possible. Tomorrow, she'd ask the hard questions. Tomorrow, she'd demand answers about the danger, about what staying would really mean. Tomorrow, she'd be strong and practical and careful. But tonight, she let herself feel safe. The baby kicked one more time, as if in agreement, and Elena drifted off to sleep holding the hand of the man who'd broken her heart, and who might, just possibly, be able to help her put it back together. Outside, Detroit glittered in the darkness, beautiful and dangerous and unforgiving. Somewhere in those streets, enemies were planning, threats were forming, violence was brewing. But up in the penthouse, wrapped in warmth and possibility, Elena Moore, or DeLuca, or whoever she'd become, allowed herself one night of peace. The war could wait until morning. Elena woke to sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows and the unfamiliar sensation of feeling rested. For a moment, she forgot where she was, forgot the collapse, the rescue, the confrontation. Then she registered the expensive sheets, the skyline view, and the empty space beside her where Marco had slept. She sat up carefully, her hand going automatically to her belly. The baby was awake too, moving with more energy than she'd felt in weeks. Maybe proper rest and a full meal made a difference. Or maybe it was the absence of constant stress, the knowledge that for one night at least, she hadn't had to worry about where her next meal would come from or whether the motel room door would hold against intruders. The bedroom door opened, and Marco appeared carrying another tray. He looked like he'd been awake for hours, showered, dressed in dark slacks and a crisp white shirt, every inch the powerful man she remembered. But his eyes were tired, shadowed with something that might have been worry. "Morning," he said, setting the tray on the nightstand. "I had breakfast brought up. The doctor will be here in an hour." Elena eyed the spread, eggs, fruit, yogurt, fresh juice. Her stomach growled audibly. "You really don't do anything halfway, do you?" "Not when it comes to you." Marco settled into the chair beside the bed, watching as she reached for the plate. "How do you feel?" "Better?" She took a bite of scrambled eggs, nearly moaning at the taste. "These are incredible." "Chef Marcus, He's been with me for 3 years, makes everything from scratch. The casual mention of live-in staff reminded Elena of the gulf between Marco's world and the one she'd been surviving in. She'd once had access to this life, personal chefs, drivers, security, anything money could buy. Walking away from it had been harder than she'd admitted, and not just because of the financial struggle. You said we'd talk today, Elena said between bites, about the threats, about what staying here really means. Marco's expression grew serious. I did. But first I need you to see the doctor. Make sure you and the baby are healthy. I'm fine. Elena. His voice was gentle but firm. You collapsed last night from exhaustion and malnutrition. You're 8 months pregnant and you've been living in a motel, working double shifts, skipping meals. You're not fine, and we both know it. The truth stung, but Elena couldn't argue. She finished the eggs in silence, then moved on to the fruit. Marco watched her eat with an intensity that should have been uncomfortable but somehow wasn't. There was nothing predatory in his gaze, just concern, deep and genuine. After the doctor, she said finally, we talk. No more delays. Agreed. The doctor arrived exactly an hour later, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and competent hands. Doctor. Sarah Chen had been Marco's personal physician for years, Elena remembered. She'd treated various injuries that Marco's men sustained, asked no questions, and kept perfect confidentiality. Elena, Dr. Chen said warmly, setting down her medical bag. It's good to see you again, though I wish it were under better circumstances. The examination was thorough and uncomfortable. Dr. Chen checked Elena's blood pressure, drew blood for testing, listened to the baby's heartbeat with a portable monitor. The steady thump-thump filled the room, and Elena saw Marco's expression transform. Awe and fear, and something fiercely protective all at once. The baby's heartbeat is strong, Dr. Chen said. But Elena, your blood pressure is elevated, and you're severely underweight for this stage of pregnancy. When was your last prenatal appointment? Elena's cheeks burned. 6 weeks ago, at the free clinic on 10th Street. And before that? I had a few appointments early on. Then I couldn't afford them anymore. Dr. Chen's expression remained neutral, but Elena caught the quick glance she exchanged with Marco. I'm going to need to run more comprehensive tests. Blood work, ultrasound, possibly more depending on what we find. You're at risk for several complications, preeclampsia, anemia, preterm labor. The baby seems healthy now, but if we don't address your nutrition and stress levels, that could change quickly. What do you need from me? Marco asked. Get her eating properly. 3 full meals a day, high protein, plenty of fluids, complete bed rest for the next 48 hours while we wait for test results. And I want to see her twice a week until delivery. Dr. Chen turned to Elena. You're due in about 4 weeks? 5, according to my last ultrasound. We'll do another one today to confirm. I'll be back this afternoon with the portable machine and a full lab setup. Dr. Chen started packing her equipment. Marco, can I speak with you outside? They stepped into the hallway, but the door didn't close completely. Elena heard fragments of their conversation. High risk, monitoring, stress factors. Marco's responses were too low to make out, but his tone was clear enough. He was worried. When they returned, Dr. Chen's smile was professional but warm. You're going to be fine, Elena, but you need to let people help you. No more trying to do everything alone. After the doctor left, Elena found herself alone with Marco again. He sat on the edge of the bed, his hands clasped between his knees, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. You promised me answers, Elena said. Start talking. Marco took a breath, then began. The Vittorio family has been trying to expand into Detroit for the last 3 years. They're based in Chicago, but they want a foothold here, my territory. I've been pushing back, which has made me a target. I know that much. You told me before we divorced. What I didn't tell you was how personal it got. Giovanni Vittorio, the family head, he doesn't just want my business. He wants to humiliate me, break me. 2 years ago, his men started surveillance on you. They documented everywhere you went, everyone you talked to. They were building a profile, looking for weaknesses. Elena's blood ran cold. How do you know? Because I have people inside his organization, and because one of his lieutenants got drunk at a card game and bragged about it. Marco's jaw tightened. They had plans, Elena. Detailed plans about how they'd use you against me. Kidnapping was the least of it. So you divorced me to take away their leverage? Yes. I thought if you weren't my wife anymore, if you were publicly separated from me, they'd lose interest. He laughed bitterly. I was wrong. Giovanni doesn't forget. And when his surveillance picked up your return to Detroit 6 months ago, he started watching you again. Elena's hands trembled. Why didn't they make a move? Because I had men watching you too. Not close enough to interfere with your life, but close enough to intervene if anyone tried something. There have been 3 attempts in the last 6 months, all stopped before they got anywhere near you. 3? Elena couldn't finish the sentence. She'd been walking around the city completely unaware that she was being hunted, that violence had been circling her like sharks. I'm sorry, Marco said quietly. I know this is a lot. You think? Elena's voice came out sharp. You're telling me that for the last 6 months, while I've been struggling to survive, there have been people trying to kidnap me? And you knew about it and didn't tell me? What would you have had me do? Show up at your motel and say, hey, I know we're divorced, but you're still in danger because of me? You would have run, and then I couldn't have protected you at all. He was right, which made it worse. Elena stood pacing the length of the bedroom, her mind racing. What happens now? They know I'm here. You said that last night. Now we adapt. Marco stood too, but kept his distance. The Vittorio family will make their move eventually. Could be a direct attack on this building, could be something more subtle. But they will come, and we need to be ready. Ready how? Increased security, fortified positions, and… Marco hesitated. You learn to protect yourself. Elena stopped pacing. You want to teach me to fight? I want to teach you to survive. How to shoot. How to identify threats. How to think tactically. You're right that you can't just rely on my protection. You need to be able to protect yourself and our daughter. The idea should have been terrifying. Instead, Elena felt something close to relief. For 2 years, she'd been helpless, dependent on luck and the kindness of strangers. The thought of having agency, of being an active participant in her own safety, was intoxicating. When do we start? Marco's eyebrows rose. You're serious? You said you wanted a partner, not a possession. Partners pull their weight. So teach me. A slow smile spread across Marco's face, the first genuine smile she'd seen from him since her return. After the baby comes. Dr. Chen would kill me if I tried to train you now. But after, yes, I'll teach you everything. And in the meantime, you stay here where it's secure. You eat, you rest, you let your body heal. The baby needs you healthy. Elena wanted to argue, to assert her independence, but the exhaustion was creeping back, reminding her that she wasn't at full strength. Fine, but I want to know everything that's happening. No more keeping me in the dark to protect me. Deal. Marco crossed to her, close enough that she could feel his body heat. There's something else we need to discuss. What? Us. His hand came up to cup her cheek. I meant what I said last night. I never stopped loving you. These 2 years have been hell without you. Elena's breath caught. Marco, I'm not asking you to make a decision right now. I know I hurt you. I know trust doesn't come back overnight. But I need you to know that if you'll have me, I want to fix this. I want our family back. The word family did something to Elena's chest, squeezing tight. She'd been alone for so long, making every decision by herself, carrying every burden solo. The idea of sharing that weight was seductive and terrifying in equal measure. I don't know if we can go back, she said honestly. Too much has happened. Then we don't go back. We go forward. Marco's thumb stroked her cheekbone. We build something new. Better than before, because this time we're both going in with our eyes open. And if the Vittorio family kills one of us, they won't. The certainty in his voice was absolute. I won't let that happen. Elena wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that love and determination could overcome the violence that surrounded Marco's life. But she'd seen too much, lost too much, to accept easy promises. I need time, she said again. I know. Marco leaned down, pressing his forehead to hers. Take all the time you need. I'll be here. The moment broke when Elena's phone rang, the cheap prepaid model she'd been using. She pulled away from Marco, digging it out of her purse. The number was unfamiliar. Hello? Elena Moore? The voice was male, smooth, with a faint Italian accent. Who is this? My name is Giovanni Vittorio. I believe you know who I am. Elena's blood turned to ice. Her eyes shot to Marco, who'd gone completely still, his expression transforming into something cold and deadly. How did you get this number? Elena demanded. I have resources, Mrs. DeLuca, or should I call you Mrs. Moore? The divorce was so sudden it's hard to keep track. Giovanni's laugh was cultured, amused. I'm calling to extend an invitation. I'm not interested. Oh, but I think you will be. You see, I know about the baby. Congratulations, by the way. A daughter, if my sources are correct. How wonderful for you and Marco. Elena's hand instinctively went to her belly. Stay away from my child. That's entirely up to you, my dear. You see, Marco and I have been at odds for quite some time. Business disagreements, territorial disputes, these things happen in our line of work. But they don't have to be permanent. Marco was moving now, gesturing urgently. Vincent appeared in the doorway and Marco mouthed instructions too fast for Elena to follow. Vincent nodded and disappeared. What do you want? Elena asked. A meeting. You, me, civilized conversation. No Marco, no bodyguards, just two people talking about the future. And if I refuse? Then the future becomes very uncertain. Accidents happen, Elena, especially to pregnant women living in unsafe neighborhoods. Oh wait, you're not in that motel anymore, are you? No, you're back with Marco. How romantic. The threat was clear despite the pleasant tone. Elena's grip tightened on the phone. If you hurt me, Marco will destroy you. Perhaps, but not before I destroy what he loves. That's how these games work. Giovanni paused. Meet with me. Tomorrow, noon, at the Bellevue Cafe on 5th Street. It's public, neutral ground. We talk, and maybe we find a way to end this without bloodshed. I'm not making deals without Marco. Then your daughter grows up in a war zone. Is that what you want? Giovanni's voice hardened. I'm offering you a chance to end this peacefully. Take it or don't. But the offer expires in 24 hours. After that, I handle things my way. The line went dead. Elena lowered the phone, her whole body shaking. Marco was there immediately, taking the phone from her trembling hands, wrapping her in his arms. What did he say? Marco's voice was dangerous. Controlled fury barely leashed. Elena told him everything, word for word. She felt Marco's body tense with each sentence, his rage building like a physical force. You're not going, he said flatly. He said, I don't care what he said. It's a trap, Elena. He wants to get you alone so he can use you against me. I won't let that happen. And if he follows through on his threats, then we deal with it. But you don't walk into his trap. Vincent reappeared with two other men Elena didn't recognize. We traced the call. Came from a burner phone already destroyed. But we've got surveillance footage from the area, Vittorio's penthouse downtown. He made the call himself. Marco nodded grimly. Increase security on all my properties. I want eyes on every entrance, every exit. And get me everything we have on the Bellevue Cafe. Blueprints, ownership records, who frequents it. If Elena's going to meet him, we're going prepared. Wait. Elena pulled away from Marco. You just said I'm not going. You're not going alone. But if we decline, Vittorio escalates. He's forcing a confrontation either way. Marco's eyes were cold, calculating. So we give him a meeting, but on our terms. How? You wear a wire. I have men positioned throughout the cafe, invisible but ready. You go in, you listen to what he has to say, you leave. If he tries anything, my men intervene. Elena's heart was pounding. And if he searches me for a wire? He will, Vincent interjected. Vittorio's paranoid. He'll have someone pat you down before you sit. Then we use a different approach. Marco was thinking out loud now, his mind working through scenarios. What if we don't hide the fact that I'm watching? What if I'm there, visible, at another table? It keeps the meeting public, keeps him from trying anything obvious, but still gives you the face-to-face he wants. He specifically said no you, no bodyguards. And you think he'll follow those same rules? Marco shook his head. Giovanni will have his own men there. This is all theater. He wants you to feel isolated and vulnerable. We don't give him that. Elena tried to think through the angles, but her mind kept snagging on one detail. Why does he want to meet me at all? What can I possibly give him that he doesn't already have? The silence that followed was heavy. Marco and Vincent exchanged a look that made Elena's stomach drop. Tell me, she demanded. Marco sighed. Giovanni thinks you're my weakness. He wants to assess you, see if you can be turned against me. He'll offer you things, protection for you and the baby, money, a way out of this life. He'll try to convince you that staying with me is dangerous for your daughter. And he'd be right, Elena said quietly. Staying with you is dangerous. Yes, Marco agreed, his voice rough. It is, which is why I'll understand if you take his offer. Elena stared at him. You think I'd betray you? I think you'd do anything to protect our child. I think you're smart enough to recognize when you're outmatched. And I think Giovanni is very good at making his offers sound reasonable. Marco's expression was carefully neutral, but Elena could see the fear underneath. If you want out, Elena, I won't stop you. I'll set you up somewhere safe, somewhere far from all of this. You and the baby will want for nothing. That's what you did last time. How did that work out? Not well, Marco admitted, but at least you were alive. Elena moved closer to him, close enough to see the lines of stress around his eyes, the tension in his jaw. I'm not leaving, not because I'm afraid of Vittorio, and not because I think your protection is better than his. I'm staying because this is my fight too now. He threatened my daughter. That makes it personal. Something fierce and possessive flared in Marco's eyes. You don't know what you're saying. Giovanni's methods. Then tell me. Show me. Stop trying to protect me from information and trust that I can handle it. Elena grabbed his hand, pressing it to her belly where the baby was kicking. She's going to grow up in this world whether we like it or not. The only question is whether I'm prepared to protect her or whether I'm another liability you have to worry about. Marco was quiet for a long moment, his hand warm against her stomach. When he spoke, his voice was low. You were never a liability. You were the one thing I couldn't afford to lose. Then stop treating me like I'm fragile. I'm not the same woman you married, Marco. The last 2 years taught me how to survive. Now you need to teach me how to fight. Vincent cleared his throat. Boss, we need to make a decision about tomorrow. If we're doing this, we need to start preparations now. Marco's eyes never left Elena's face. We're doing this. Elena meets with Vittorio, but I'm there, visible. Let him know that if he wants to play games, we play together. He turned to Vincent. Get me 20 men. Best we have. I want that cafe locked down tight. No one gets in or out without us knowing. What about the meeting itself? Elena asked. What do I say to him? You listen. Let him make his pitch, whatever it is. Don't agree to anything. Don't make promises. Just gather information. Marco's jaw tightened. And if he threatens you or the baby directly, you walk out. My men will cover your exit. He won't threaten directly, Vincent said. Vittorio's too smart for that. He'll be charming, persuasive. Make it sound like he's offering salvation. Then Elena needs to be smarter. Marco looked at her. Can you do this? Can you sit across from a man who wants to use you and keep your composure? Elena thought about the last 2 years. The humiliation of being broke, the fear of being alone and pregnant, the exhaustion of working herself to collapse. She'd survived all of that without breaking. One conversation with a mobster didn't scare her. I can do it, she said firmly. Dr. Chen returned that afternoon with enough medical equipment to stock a small clinic. The ultrasound took 45 minutes, with the doctor examining every detail of the baby's development. Elena watched the screen, seeing her daughter's profile, the tiny hands that moved restlessly, the strong heartbeat that filled the room. Everything looks good, Dr. Chen said finally. She's measuring small, but that's expected given your nutritional state. We'll get you back on track and she'll catch up. She? Elena's voice caught. You're sure? Dr. Chen smiled. 99% sure, congratulations. You're having a daughter. Marco, who'd been standing in the corner trying to stay out of the way, made a sound like he'd been punched. Elena looked over to see his eyes bright with unshed tears. his expression a mixture of joy and terror. A daughter, he repeated softly. After Dr. Chen left with instructions for nutrition and rest, Elena found herself alone with Marco again. He sat beside her on the bed, staring at the ultrasound photo like it held the secrets of the universe. I don't know how to do this, he admitted. How to be a father. My own father was... He stopped, shook his head. He wasn't someone I want to emulate. So you do better. Elena took his hand. You already are better. You're here, you're present, you care. That's more than a lot of fathers manage. What if I can't protect her? What if something happens and then we handle it together? That's what partners do, right? Elena squeezed his fingers. Stop trying to carry everything alone, Marco. Let me help. He looked at her then, really looked, and Elena saw the vulnerability he usually kept hidden. Marco De Luca, feared crime boss, was terrified of failing his daughter before she was even born. I love you, he said suddenly. I know I have no right to say that after everything, but it's true. I love you, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life proving you made the right choice by staying. Elena's throat tightened. She wasn't ready to say the words back. Too much hurt stood between them still, but she could offer something else. Ask me again after the meeting tomorrow, she said. After I've faced Vittorio and we're both still standing, then we'll talk about the future. Marco nodded, accepting the boundary. They spent the rest of the evening planning for the next day's meeting, going over scenarios, discussing signals, establishing exit strategies. Vincent and his men came and went, reporting on surveillance, confirming positions, running through contingencies. By the time Elena finally climbed into bed, exhaustion dragged at her bones. But it was a different kind of tired than she'd felt at the motel, purposeful, like she'd accomplished something instead of just surviving another day. Marco joined her, and this time Elena didn't hesitate before curling into his side, her head on his chest. His arms came around her immediately, protective and warm. Whatever happens tomorrow, Elena whispered, we face it together. Together, Marco agreed, his lips brushing her forehead. Outside, the city hummed with late-night energy. Somewhere in those streets, Giovanni Vittorio was making his own plans, moving his own pieces on the board. But in Marco's penthouse, wrapped in his arms with their daughter safe between them, Elena felt something she hadn't experienced in 2 years. She felt ready. The morning of the meeting arrived with deceptive calm. Elena woke early, her mind already racing through the day ahead. Marco was already awake beside her, his eyes open and staring at the ceiling, clearly having spent the night running through his own scenarios of what could go wrong. Second thoughts? He asked without looking at her. About a dozen. Elena sat up, her hand automatically going to her belly. The baby was quiet this morning, as if sensing the tension. But I'm still going. Marco finally turned his head, studying her face. You don't have to prove anything, Elena. Not to me, not to Vittorio, not to anyone. I'm not trying to prove anything. I'm trying to end this before our daughter is born into an active war. She met his eyes. That's worth the risk. He reached over, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. You're braver than I gave you credit for. I'm sorry it took me so long to see it. You're forgiven. Now tell me again what I'm walking into. They went over the plan 3 more times during breakfast. Vincent joined them, bringing detailed surveillance photos of the Bellevue Cafe, every entrance, every exit, every blind spot. Marco's men would be positioned as customers, waitstaff, even a fake utility worker on the street outside. Elena would never be more than 15 feet from armed protection. Vittorio will have his own people there, Vincent reminded her. At least 6 that we've identified from his usual security detail. They'll be watching for our guys, and our guys will be watching them. It's going to be tense. What's my role exactly? Elena asked. Beyond just showing up? Marco leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. Giovanni wants to assess you. He'll try to charm you first. That's his style. He'll be polite, sophisticated, make you feel like you're having a reasonable conversation with a reasonable man. Don't buy it. Then what? He'll probe for weaknesses. Ask about your relationship with me, about the divorce, about how you've been living. He's looking for leverage, something he can use to drive a wedge between us. Marco's jaw tightened. He'll probably offer you protection, money, a way out. Make it sound like I'm the problem and he's the solution. And when I refuse, that's when it gets interesting. He'll either escalate the threats or he'll reveal his real agenda. Vincent pulled out another photo, this one showing Giovanni Vittorio himself. He was in his mid-50s, silver-haired and distinguished-looking, more like a banker than a crime boss. Don't let the appearance fool you. Giovanni's killed more people than most men have met. He just does it with a smile. Elena studied the photo, memorizing the face. What's his real agenda? What does he actually want from this meeting? Marco and Vincent exchanged a look. We're not entirely sure, Marco admitted. Giovanni doesn't make moves without multiple objectives. The meeting could be a genuine attempt at negotiation, or it could be misdirection while he makes a play elsewhere. Or, he paused, clearly reluctant to continue. Or what? Or he wants to see if you're worth taking, not just as leverage, but as a prize. Marco's voice had gone cold. Giovanni collects things: art, cars, businesses, people. If he thinks you're valuable enough, he might try to acquire you permanently. The implication made Elena's skin crawl. You mean kidnap me? Among other possibilities, Vincent's tone was matter-of-fact. That's why we're going heavy on security. If he tries anything, we shut it down immediately. Elena absorbed this, forcing herself to think tactically rather than emotionally. If he did try to take me during the meeting, what would that look like? How would it happen? Marco seemed surprised by the question, but answered it. Most likely scenario. He'd have a doctor standing by to sedate you, then his men would move you to a waiting vehicle. The whole thing would take less than 3 minutes. By the time my men realized what was happening and fought through his security, you'd be gone. So we need a signal. Something I can do to alert your guys if I sense that's about to happen. You leave, Marco said flatly. You feel threatened, you stand up and walk out. No warnings, no second chances. And if he blocks my exit? Vincent answered this time. Then you hit the floor, drop straight down, cover your head. Our guys will move in with lethal force, and you stay down until one of us tells you it's clear. The clinical discussion of violence should have frightened Elena. Instead, she felt oddly calm. This was the reality of Marco's world, and if she was going to be part of it, she needed to understand the rules. They spent the next 2 hours preparing. Marco insisted Elena wear a specific outfit, a loose-fitting dress that concealed her pregnancy somewhat, comfortable shoes she could run in if necessary, and a coat with reinforced lining that offered minimal protection against blades. He also gave her a small device that looked like a compact mirror. Emergency beacon, he explained, demonstrating how to open it. You flip this open, it sends an immediate alert to every one of my men in the area. Use it only if you're in serious trouble. It'll trigger an aggressive response. Elena tucked the compact into her purse alongside the cheap phone Vittorio had called. She felt like she was preparing for battle, which she supposed she was. Just a different kind than she'd ever imagined fighting. At 11:30, they left for the cafe. Marco rode with her in the back of the armored SUV, Vincent driving with 2 more men in the front seat. The vehicle behind them carried another 6 members of Marco's security team. The drive took only 15 minutes, but it felt like hours. Remember, Marco said as they approached the cafe, you're in control of this meeting, not him. You decide when it ends, you decide what information he gets. Don't let him make you feel cornered. I won't. Elena's voice was steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. The Bellevue Cafe occupied a corner building in Detroit's financial district, all glass windows and upscale ambiance. Through the windows, Elena could see it was moderately busy, the lunch crowd just beginning to filter in. Marco's men were already in position, she knew, though she couldn't identify them from outside. The SUV pulled to the curb. Vincent got out first, scanning the street with professional efficiency. Then he opened Elena's door, offering his hand to help her out. Marco followed, his presence immediately drawing attention from passers-by. He was too well known in Detroit to move unnoticed. I'll be at the table by the window, Marco said quietly, his hand at the small of Elena's back. You'll be able to see me the entire time. If you need me, I know. Elena touched his face briefly, a gesture of reassurance. I'll be fine. They entered the cafe together. Immediately, Elena spotted Giovanni Vittorio sitting at a corner booth, watching them with an expression of amused interest. He was exactly as his photos suggested, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit, silver hair perfectly styled, an air of cultured sophistication that made him seem out of place in Detroit's grittier reality. He stood as they approached, his smile warm and welcoming. Elena, thank you for coming. And Marco, I didn't expect to see you here. Didn't you? Marco's voice was flat. I think we both know that's a lie, Giovanni. Giovanni's smile widened. Fair enough. I appreciate honesty. Please, Elena, sit. Marco, I trust you'll give us some privacy for our conversation? I'll be right over there. Marco gestured to the window table, then fixed Giovanni with a hard stare. And Giovanni? My men are everywhere. You know that, right? Of course. As are mine. Giovanni's tone was pleasant. Shall we all try very hard not to start a war in a public cafe? Think of the other customers. Marco's jaw tightened, but he nodded. He caught Elena's eye once more, a silent question in his gaze. Elena nodded back. She was ready. Then Marco walked to the window table and sat, positioning himself so he had a clear view of Elena's booth. Elena slid into the seat across from Giovanni, very aware of the two large men standing a respectful distance away, his security. Up close, Vittorio was even more polished than his photos suggested. He had the kind of charisma that came from decades of manipulating people, of reading them and knowing exactly what to say. You're even more beautiful than my reports suggested, Giovanni said, signaling a waiter. Would you like something to drink? Eat? The food here is excellent. Water is fine. Giovanni ordered sparkling water for both of them, then settled back in his seat, studying Elena with open curiosity. You've had quite a journey these past 2 years, from penthouse to poverty and back again. That must have been difficult. You had me followed. Of course I did. You're connected to Marco De Luca. That makes you relevant to my interests. Giovanni's smile didn't waver. I know about the motel, the diner job, the struggle to make ends meet. I know you came back to Detroit 6 months ago despite having enough money to start over somewhere safer. That suggests either remarkable courage or remarkable foolishness. Maybe both. Indeed. The waiter brought their water, and Giovanni waited until he'd left before continuing. I also know about the baby. Congratulations. A daughter, I understand. Elena's hand moved protectively to her belly. Stay away from my child. I have no intention of harming your child, Elena. Quite the opposite, actually. Giovanni leaned forward, his expression earnest. I'm a father myself. 3 daughters, all grown now. I understand the instinct to protect them at all costs. Then you understand why I'm not interested in whatever you're offering. But you don't know what I'm offering yet. Giovanni took a sip of water. Hear me out. That's all I ask. 5 minutes of your time, and then you can make an informed decision. Elena glanced toward Marco's table. He was watching them intently, his body language radiating barely controlled tension. She could see Vincent at another table, pretending to read a newspaper. 2 more of Marco's men sat at the counter. The cafe felt like a powder keg waiting for a spark. 5 minutes, Elena agreed. Giovanni nodded, pleased. Marco De Luca is a dangerous man. You know this already. You've seen his world, lived in it. What you may not fully appreciate is just how dangerous that world is becoming. The old rules, the old agreements that kept our various organizations from open warfare, those are breaking down. Territory disputes that would have been settled through negotiation 20 years ago now end in bloodshed. Marco is at the center of several of these conflicts, including with you. Including with me, yes. Marco controls access to the ports, to certain distribution networks I need for my business. He's refused every reasonable offer I've made to share those resources. Instead, he's chosen confrontation. Giovanni's expression grew serious. That confrontation will escalate, Elena. It's inevitable. And when it does, people close to Marco will be caught in the crossfire. Is that a threat? It's a prediction based on 30 years in this business. I don't have to threaten you. Reality will do that for me. Giovanni paused as the waiter returned to take their lunch order. Elena declined food, but Giovanni ordered a salad with casual confidence. Once they were alone again, he continued, I'm offering you an alternative. You and your daughter, protected completely. A generous financial arrangement, a home, anywhere you choose, Security that doesn't depend on Marco's continued survival. All you have to do is walk away. And in return, you provide me with information about Marco's operations. Nothing that would get him killed. I'm not asking you to betray him to that degree. Just enough intelligence to give me leverage in negotiations. Help me force him to the table rather than to war. Elena let the offer sit between them, considering it from all angles. On the surface, it seemed almost reasonable. Giovanni was framing himself as the peacemaker, offering her safety while claiming he wanted to avoid violence. But underneath the polished presentation, the real ask was clear. He wanted her to spy on Marco, to betray the man she'd loved, to sell out her daughter's father. "You think I'd trust you to keep your word?" Elena asked. "I think you're smart enough to recognize that my word is backed by self-interest. If I harmed you or your daughter after promising protection, my reputation would be destroyed. No one would trust me again. I've built my organization on being a man who honors his agreements." Giovanni smiled. "Unlike Marco, who divorced you to protect you and then let you struggle in poverty for 2 years. The barb hit its target. Elena felt the old hurt flare, the memory of waking up to those divorce papers, of feeling discarded and worthless. Giovanni was good at this. He'd found the wound and was probing it expertly. "Marco made mistakes," Elena said carefully, "but at least his mistakes came from a genuine desire to keep me safe." "What's your motivation, Giovanni? Really?" "Profit. Expansion. The same things that motivate any businessman." He leaned back, his expression candid. "I don't pretend to be altruistic, Elena. I want what Marco has, and I'm willing to pay you well to help me get it. The fact that it also removes you from a dangerous situation is simply good fortune for both of us. And if Marco agrees to your terms, if you get your negotiation and your access to his resources, then I have no further need of you, and you're free to live your life however you choose. With him, without him, that would be entirely your decision." Elena glanced toward Marco again. He was gripping his water glass so hard she was surprised it didn't shatter. He knew what Giovanni was doing, knew the exact pitch being made, and it was killing him not to intervene. "I need to use the restroom," Elena said suddenly. Giovanni's eyebrows rose slightly. "Of course. It's just through that door. I know where it is." Elena stood, feeling the eyes of every security person in the cafe track her movement. She walked toward the back hallway, very aware that she was moving out of Marco's direct line of sight. The hallway was empty except for one of Giovanni's men standing near the emergency exit. He nodded at Elena as she passed, his hand resting casually on the bulge under his jacket that suggested a concealed weapon. Elena pushed into the women's restroom, her heart pounding. She went to the sink, running cold water over her wrists, trying to steady herself. Giovanni's offer had been exactly what Marco predicted, reasonable on the surface, poisonous underneath. But what unsettled Elena wasn't the offer itself. It was how tempting it was. Not the betrayal part. She had no intention of spying on Marco. But the idea of being free from all of this, of raising her daughter somewhere safe and quiet, away from territories and violence and constant threat, that was seductive. For a moment, she let herself imagine it. A small house in a peaceful town. A normal life. Her daughter growing up without knowing what her father really did. The bathroom door opened and a woman entered, mid-30s, professionally dressed. She smiled at Elena, then went into a stall. Normal, civilian. Someone whose biggest worry was probably an afternoon meeting or what to make for dinner. Elena looked at herself in the mirror. Her reflection showed someone she barely recognized, still too thin despite 2 days of Marco's chef's cooking, dark circles under her eyes, but something else too. A hardness that hadn't been there 2 years ago. The struggles had changed her, stripped away the naivete that had made her think love alone could sustain a marriage in Marco's world. The woman emerged from the stall, washed her hands, and left. Elena was alone again. She pulled out her phone, not the burner Vittorio had called, but Marco's gift that she'd started carrying again. She typed out a quick message. "I'm okay. Almost done here." She hit send, knowing Marco would get it immediately. His response came within seconds. "Take your time. I love you." 3 words that shouldn't have meant everything, but somehow did. Elena tucked the phone away and returned to the dining room. Giovanni was eating his salad when she slid back into the booth. "Feel better?" he asked. Much. Thank you for your patience. Of course. He set down his fork, giving her his full attention. Have you given any thought to my proposal? I have, Elena said, and my answer is no. Giovanni's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes, disappointment maybe, or anger quickly suppressed. May I ask why? Because you're asking me to betray my daughter's father. Because you're positioning yourself as the reasonable one when you're the aggressor in this conflict. And because, Elena leaned forward, her voice dropping, I don't believe for a second that you'd let me walk away peacefully once you got what you wanted. You'd always have leverage over me, always have a reason to pull me back in. That's not freedom. That's just a different kind of cage. You're very perceptive. Giovanni's smile returned, but it was colder now. Marco chose well when he married you. It's a shame he was foolish enough to let you go. He didn't let me go. He pushed me away thinking it would save my life. And maybe he was right. Maybe staying married to him would have gotten me killed, but at least he was honest about the danger. You're trying to dress up the same threats in prettier packaging. The difference is that I'm offering you a genuine choice. Stay with Marco and watch this war unfold around your daughter, or take my protection and give her a chance at normalcy. There's a third option, Elena said. I stay with Marco, and we end this war on our terms. Giovanni laughed, genuine amusement in the sound. And how exactly do you plan to do that? I have no idea, but I know I'm not doing it by selling out to you. Elena stood, signaling the end of the meeting. Thank you for the water, and Giovanni, if you come after my daughter, I will kill you myself. The threat should have been laughable coming from a pregnant woman with no combat training facing a powerful crime boss. But Elena delivered it with such absolute conviction that Giovanni's smile faded completely. I believe you would try, he said quietly, which makes you even more dangerous than I anticipated. Be careful, Elena. Women like you don't survive long in this world. Then I guess I'll have to be the exception. Elena turned and walked toward Marco's table. She felt Giovanni's eyes on her back, felt the tension in the room ratchet up as every armed man recognized the meeting was over. Marco stood as she approached, his expression a mixture of relief and barely controlled fury. We're leaving, he said, loud enough for Giovanni to hear. Agreed. Vincent appeared at Elena's elbow, subtly positioning himself between her and Giovanni's line of sight. They moved as a unit toward the door, Marco in front, Vincent beside Elena, the other security men falling into formation. Through the cafe window, Elena could see the armored SUV pulling up to the curb. They were 10 feet from the exit when Giovanni's voice rang out. Elena, one more thing. She should have kept walking. Marco's hand on her arm suggested he thought so too, but something in Giovanni's tone made her pause. She turned back. Giovanni had stood and was now moving toward them, his own security flanking him. The entire cafe had gone silent, every customer aware that something significant was happening, even if they didn't understand what. I made you an offer in good faith, Giovanni said, his voice carrying across the room. You rejected it. That's your right. But understand this. I gave you a chance to choose peace. What happens next is on you. Is that another threat? Elena asked. It's a promise. The war is coming, and when it arrives, I won't show mercy to anyone on Marco's side. Not to his men, not to his businesses, Giovanni paused meaningfully, and not to his family. Marco moved so fast, Elena barely registered it. One moment he was beside her, the next he had Giovanni by the throat, slamming him back against the wall. Both sets of security personnel drew weapons, a dozen guns suddenly trained in various directions. You threaten my family again, Marco hissed, his face inches from Giovanni's, and I will burn your entire organization to the ground. I will kill everyone you love, destroy everything you've built, and make sure your name becomes a cautionary tale. Do you understand me? Giovanni's face was turning red from lack of oxygen, but he managed a strained smile. Proving my point about how dangerous you are. But yes, Marco, message received. Marco released him with a shove. Giovanni stumbled back, his security moving to steady him while keeping their weapons trained on Marco's men. We're done here, Marco said, his voice like ice. He took Elena's arm, gentler now, and they turned toward the exit. This time, no one stopped them. The SUV ride back to the penthouse was silent and tense. Marco sat rigid beside Elena, his hands clenched into fists, breathing hard like he'd just run a marathon. Vincent drove with professional focus, but even he seemed shaken by how close they'd come to open warfare in a public cafe. "That was stupid," Vincent finally said, grabbing him like that. "You gave him exactly what he wanted, proof that you're volatile, that Elena's your trigger point." "I don't care." Marco's voice was rough. "He threatened my daughter." "He was going to threaten her anyway. Now he knows for certain that she's your weakness." Vincent's eyes met Marco's in the rearview mirror. "We need to move up our timeline. Whatever plans we had for dealing with Vittorio, we accelerate them." Elena found her voice. "What timeline? What plans?" Marco turned to her, and she saw something in his expression that made her stomach drop. "We've been building a case against Giovanni for the past year. Evidence of his operations, witnesses willing to testify, connections to legitimate law enforcement who are tired of his organization operating with impunity. We were going to move in 6 months after the baby was born and you were recovered. But Vincent's right. We need to act now." "A case? You mean legal action?" Elena couldn't hide her surprise. "I thought your world didn't work that way." "It usually doesn't, but Giovanni's been getting careless, expanding too fast. He's made enemies in places that matter. Federal prosecutors, judges, politicians he's tried to buy who don't stay bought. We've been collecting everything they need to take him down permanently." Marco's expression was grim. "The problem is that it takes time to build a prosecution that will stick. Time we may not have anymore. Because he'll move first." "Yes." Elena processed this, her mind racing. "So what do we do? How do we protect ourselves while you're building your case?" "We go on lockdown. The penthouse becomes a fortress. You don't leave. I limit my movements. We bring everything we need inside." Marco's hand found hers. "It's not ideal, but—" "No." Elena interrupted him. "We're not going back to that pattern. You hiding me away, making decisions alone, treating me like I'm too fragile to handle reality." "Elena, this is different. Giovanni just declared war in front of witnesses. He'll move against us soon, probably within days." "Then we move first." Elena squeezed his hand. "You said you had evidence. How close are you to having enough to move on him?" Vincent answered. 3 weeks. Maybe 4. We need to secure testimony from 2 more witnesses, both of whom are nervous about coming forward. So we secure them. What do they need? Protection? Money? Assurance that Giovanni can't retaliate? All of the above. Marco was looking at her strangely. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking that Giovanni made a mistake today. He assumed I'd be scared, that threatening our daughter would make me want to hide, but it had the opposite effect." Elena felt a cold clarity settling over her. "He wants a war? Then we give him one. But we fight smart. We use the law, we use his own expansion against him. We hit him where he's weakest instead of playing to his strengths." Marco's expression shifted from worry to something that looked like pride. "You're talking about strategy." "I'm talking about survival. Our daughter deserves better than being born into a battlefield." Elena looked between Marco and Vincent. "So, tell me everything. The evidence, the witnesses, the timeline. All of it. And then we figure out how to compress 4 weeks into 4 days." Vincent pulled the SUV into the underground garage of Marco's building. As they got out, Elena noticed the increased security. Armed men at every entrance, cameras that hadn't been there before, reinforced barriers. Marco wasn't taking chances. They rode the elevator up in silence. When they entered the penthouse, Elena was surprised to see a conference table had been set up in the living room, covered with papers, photographs, and files. 3 men she didn't recognize stood as they entered. "Elena, these are my senior advisors," Marco said. "David handles our legal strategies, Thomas manages intelligence, and Robert coordinates with law enforcement. Gentlemen, this is Elena. She'll be joining our planning sessions from now on." If the men were surprised, they hid it well. They nodded respectfully, then waited for Marco's lead. "Show her everything," Marco said. "Every file, every piece of evidence, every risk. No more secrets." For the next 3 hours, Elena got a comprehensive education in how to destroy a criminal empire legally. The files on Giovanni were extensive, detailed records of his operations, financial transactions that proved money laundering, testimony from victims of his enforcement tactics, connections to politicians that constituted bribery and corruption. The challenge isn't the evidence, David explained. He was older, maybe 60, with the careful demeanor of someone who'd spent decades navigating legal complexities. We have more than enough to prosecute. The challenge is keeping witnesses alive long enough to testify and finding a prosecutor willing to take the case knowing the risks. We have a prosecutor, Thomas interjected. He was younger, intense, with the bearing of former military. Federal attorney named Sarah Chen. She's been building cases against organized crime for 10 years, and she wants Giovanni badly. But she needs her witnesses protected, real protection, not promises. Can we do that? Elena asked. Normally? Yes, but Giovanni's reach is extensive. He has people inside police departments, federal agencies, even protective custody programs. Keeping witnesses safe requires resources and absolute discretion. Thomas pulled out a map marked with various locations. We'd need to move all of them simultaneously before Giovanni realizes what's happening. That kind of coordination takes time. Or money. Elena studied the map. How many witnesses? 5 total. 2 have already been secured in different states under false identities. The other 3 are still in Detroit, still vulnerable. So we move them, tonight. Elena looked at Marco. You have the resources, right? Safe houses, transportation, new identities? We do, but moving that fast is our only option if Giovanni's about to strike. Elena's voice was firm. We can't sit here fortifying the penthouse while people who are willing to testify against him get killed. That makes us no better than him. Marco studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. You're right. Thomas, coordinate with our contacts. I want all 3 witnesses moved by midnight tonight. Different locations, different routes, maximum security. David, call Sarah Chen. Tell her we're accelerating the timeline and she needs to be ready to file charges within 72 hours. Marco, that's... David hesitated. That's incredibly aggressive. The courts move slowly. Then we make the move faster. File emergency motions. Request expedited hearings. Use every legal tool in your arsenal. Marco's expression was hard. Giovanni threatened my family and a room full of witnesses. That's a mistake we're going to exploit. Robert, who'd been quiet until now, spoke up. What about security here? If we're moving witnesses and preparing to file charges, Giovanni will know something's happening. He'll strike at you directly. Let him try. Marco's voice was cold. This building is a fortress. He'd need an army to breach it. He has an army, Vincent pointed out. And while your building is secure, what about when you need to move? Court appearances, meetings with the prosecutor, coordinating the witness relocations. You'll be exposed. Marco was silent, clearly running through scenarios. Elena watched him process the risks, saw the moment when he reached the inevitable conclusion. I don't leave, he said finally. Everything happens from here. Sarah Chen comes to us, we coordinate witness movements remotely, we use secure communications for everything. Until this is over, until Giovanni is in custody, I stay inside. And me? Elena asked. You especially don't leave. Marco stopped, seeming to struggle with how to say it. You're the most important thing in my life. If Giovanni wants to hurt me, he goes through you. That's not happening. Elena wanted to argue, to assert her independence, but the baby kicked just then, a strong reminder of what was at stake. Okay, she agreed. We stay here. We coordinate from inside. But Marco, we do this together. No more making decisions without me. Together, he confirmed. The rest of the afternoon dissolved into coordinated chaos. Phone calls were made, plans were set in motion, security was doubled and then tripled. Elena watched Marco work, seeing a side of him she'd only glimpsed before, the strategic mind, the ability to coordinate multiple operations simultaneously, the absolute authority he commanded from his people. By evening, all 3 vulnerable witnesses had been moved. Sarah Chen had agreed to emergency meetings the following day, and word had started spreading through Detroit's underworld that something big was about to happen. Elena stood at the window, watching the city lights sparkle in the darkness when Marco came up behind her, his arms wrapped around her, his hands settling over their daughter. Are you scared? He asked quietly. Terrified, Elena admitted. But also, I don't know. Ready? Is that strange? No, I feel the same way. Marco's breath was warm against her neck. We've been in a holding pattern for 2 years, both of us stuck. Now we're finally moving forward. Or falling off a cliff together. Maybe both. He turned her to face him. Elena, I need you to know. If this goes wrong, if Giovanni finds a way through our defenses, I need you to take the baby and run. Vincent has escape routes planned, resources that Giovanni can't trace. Promise me you'll go. Only if you're coming with me. I'm serious. So am I. Elena met his eyes. We survive together or not at all. That's the deal. Marco looked like he wanted to argue, but instead he just pulled her close, holding her like she was the only stable thing in his world. They stood there for a long time, watching the city and waiting for the storm they'd just set in motion to break over them. Tomorrow, Sarah Chen would arrive. Tomorrow, the legal machinery would begin grinding. Tomorrow, they'd start the final push to take down Giovanni Vittorio. But tonight, in the quiet moments before the chaos, Elena let herself feel something she hadn't allowed in 2 years. She let herself hope. The hope didn't last long. Elena woke at 3 in the morning to the sound of Marco's phone ringing with the specific tone that meant emergency. She felt him tense beside her before he even reached for the device, his body going from relaxed to combat ready in an instant. Talk to me, Marco answered, his voice sharp despite the hour. Elena couldn't hear the other side of the conversation, but she watched Marco's expression transform from alert to furious. He sat up, already reaching for his clothes with his free hand. When? A pause. How many? Another pause, longer this time. I want everyone pulled back to the penthouse. Now. I don't care what operations are running. End them. We go into full defensive mode until we know what we're dealing with. He ended the call and turned to Elena, his face grim in the darkness. One of our safe houses was hit an hour ago. The one where we moved the witness, Michael Torres. He managed to get out, but 2 of our men didn't. Elena's heart clenched. Dead? Yes. Marco's jaw was tight. Giovanni's moving faster than we anticipated. Someone told him about the witness relocation. Either we have a leak or he's got surveillance we didn't detect. Michael Torres, he's safe now? In the wind. Vincent's people are trying to locate him, but he panicked and ran. Can't blame him. He just watched 2 men die protecting him. Marco stood, pulling on pants and a shirt. We need to assume the other witnesses are compromised too. I'm having them moved again, different locations, and we're stripping down the team to only people I'd trust with my life. Elena threw off the covers, reaching for her own clothes. What do you need me to do? Stay here. Stay safe. Marco caught her hands. I mean it, Elena. The penthouse is the most secure location we have. Don't leave this floor for any reason. Where are you going? Command center. Vincent set it up in the building's sublevel, reinforced walls, isolated communications. I need to coordinate the response, figure out how Giovanni found Torres, and make sure our remaining witnesses don't end up dead. He kissed her forehead quickly. I'll be back as soon as I can. He was gone before Elena could argue, the door closing behind him with a soft click. She stood in the middle of the bedroom, her heart racing, feeling utterly helpless. 2 men were dead because of the plan she'd helped accelerate. Michael Torres was running for his life, and Giovanni Vittorio had just demonstrated that he could strike at them anywhere. Elena moved to the window, looking out at the pre-dawn darkness. Somewhere in those streets, a man was hiding, terrified, knowing that speaking against Giovanni might cost him everything. Somewhere else, 2 families were about to learn they'd lost sons, brothers, fathers. The abstract concept of war had suddenly become very real. She pressed her hand to her belly, feeling their daughter move restlessly. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry you're being born into this. The baby kicked in response, strong and insistent. Elena took it as reassurance or maybe defiance. Either way, she couldn't fall apart now. Marco needed her sharp, focused thinking clearly. Self-recrimination would have to wait. She dressed properly and made her way to the kitchen. The penthouse was eerily quiet, the usual household staff absent this early. Elena made coffee, the familiar ritual helping to calm her nerves. then settled at the kitchen island with her phone. The news was already reporting a fire at a residential building on the east side. The safe house, Elena realized. The official story was an electrical malfunction, residents evacuated safely, no casualties reported. The lie was smooth and complete, the kind that came from having the right people in the right places to control the narrative. 2 men dead, and the world would never know they'd died protecting a witness. Their families would get some story about an accident or a botched robbery. They'd grieve without understanding the truth. It made Elena sick. Her phone buzzed with a text from Marco. Situation contained for now. Torres located. We're bringing him in through a different route. Don't wait up. Elena texted back, "Be careful. I love you." She stared at those last 3 words for a long moment before hitting send. She'd been holding them back, keeping that particular wall in place even as others came down. But 2 men had just died, and Marco was down in a bunker coordinating a war, and life was too short and too brutal to waste on pride. His response came immediately. "I love you too. Always have." The morning crawled by with agonizing slowness. Elena tried to eat breakfast, managing only toast and fruit. She attempted to read, to watch television, to do anything that would quiet her racing mind. Nothing worked. By 9 o'clock, she was pacing the penthouse like a caged animal, checking her phone every few minutes for updates that never came. Dr. Chen arrived at 10, making her twice-weekly checkup. She took one look at Elena and frowned. "Your blood pressure is elevated. What's going on?" "Stress?" Elena didn't elaborate. Dr. Chen knew enough about Marco's world to read between the lines. "Well, we need to manage it. Stress at this stage can trigger early labor, and you're not quite at 37 weeks yet. Ideally, we want you to carry for at least 2 more weeks." Dr. Chen pulled out her blood pressure cuff. "Where's Marco?" "Dealing with the situation." Dr. Chen's tone was neutral as she took the reading. "Still elevated, but not dangerously so. I want you on bed rest for the next 24 hours. And Elena, I know that's probably impossible given what's happening, but your daughter needs you calm. Find a way to manage the stress." After Dr. Chen left, Elena did try to rest. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind refusing to quiet. Every sound made her jump. Footsteps in the hallway, doors opening, the distant ping of the elevator. The penthouse had become a gilded prison, and Elena was going stir-crazy. Marco finally returned at 2 in the afternoon, looking exhausted and grim. He found Elena in the bedroom and immediately pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "Torres is secure," he said into her hair. "Different safe house, minimal staff, location known only to me and Vincent. The other 2 witnesses have been moved again too. We're using a rotation system now, switching locations every 12 hours. "What about the leak? Did you find out how Giovanni knew where to hit?" Marco pulled back, his expression dark. "Yeah, we found it. Anthony Russo, one of my mid-level guys. He'd been feeding information to Giovanni for 6 months. Vincent's handling it." Elena didn't ask what handling it meant. She was beginning to understand the brutal economics of Marco's world. Betrayal had consequences, swift and final. "Are there other leaks?" "We're running everyone through verification now. Anyone who had access to witness information, anyone who knew about the safe house locations. It's going to take time we don't have, but..." Marco scrubbed his hands over his face. "We can't move forward if we can't trust our own people." "What about Sarah Chen? Is she still willing to prosecute?" "More than ever. The attack on Torres actually strengthened her case. She can add witness intimidation and murder charges. But she needs time to prep, and time is the one thing we're running out of." Marco sat heavily on the edge of the bed. "Giovanni's not waiting for us to build our case anymore. He's hitting us now, trying to eliminate our leverage before we can use it." Elena sat beside him, taking his hand. "So we hit back." "With what?" "Legal proceedings take weeks. We're trying to fight a street war with courtroom weapons, and it's not working." "Then maybe we need to rethink our approach." Elena's mind was racing, connecting pieces. What if we leaked the evidence? Not through official channels, but to the media, investigative journalists who'd love to take down a major crime boss. Marco looked at her sharply. "That would poison any legal case. Nothing we've gathered would be admissible if it's been made public first. But it would put pressure on Giovanni, force him to defend himself publicly, tie up his resources dealing with media scrutiny and public outrage. It might slow him down enough for us to get the legal case in order. It might also make him more desperate. Desperate men do stupid, violent things. Marco was quiet for a moment, considering. But you're not wrong. If we can't win this clean, we might need to get messy. I thought your world was already messy. A ghost of a smile crossed Marco's face. There are degrees. What you're suggesting, going public, breaking the code of silence that keeps our world functioning, that's nuclear. Once we do that, there's no going back. Everyone in Detroit will know we're the ones who broke ranks. Good. Let them know. Let everyone see that you're willing to burn it all down to protect your family. Elena squeezed his hand. Giovanni thinks you're predictable. He thinks he can outmaneuver you because he understands the rules you play by. So change the rules. Marco studied her face, and Elena saw something shift in his expression. A decision being made, a line being crossed. You're right. We've been playing defense since this started. Time to go on offense. He pulled out his phone, making a call. David, I need you to compile everything we have on Giovanni Vittorio. Every file, every piece of evidence, every witness statement, make it readable for a civilian audience. I want timelines, financial charts, photos. We're building a media package. He listened for a moment. I don't care about admissibility anymore. We're going in a different direction. Have it ready in 24 hours. When he hung up, Elena asked, Who are you giving it to? Rachel Morrison at the Detroit Free Press. She's been investigating organized crime for a decade, and she's got the integrity to not bury the story under pressure. This will make her career and destroy Giovanni's reputation. Marco's expression was hard. By this time tomorrow, everyone in Detroit will know exactly what kind of monster he is. He'll retaliate. Absolutely. Which is why we're going into full lockdown starting now. No one enters this building without biometric clearance. We bring in supplies for a siege, and we prepare for Giovanni to throw everything he has at us. The next 24 hours passed in a blur of preparation. Elena watched Marco transform the penthouse into a command center, coordinating multiple operations simultaneously. Deliveries arrived constantly: food, medical supplies, ammunition, communications equipment. The building's security was upgraded to military grade. Vincent brought in 40 additional men, all personally vetted, to supplement the existing security detail. David arrived with the compiled evidence, and Elena spent hours reviewing it with Marco and his legal team. The documentation was damning, detailed proof of Giovanni's operations spanning 3 decades: murders, extortion, human trafficking, drug distribution, political corruption. The man had built an empire on suffering, and now it was all laid out in stark, irrefutable detail. This is going to destroy him, David said quietly, looking at the compiled files. Even if the legal case falls apart, this level of public exposure, he'll never recover from it. That's the idea. Marco's voice was cold. He threatened my daughter. He killed my men. He wants a war. He gets complete annihilation. Rachel Morrison arrived at midnight, brought to the penthouse under heavy security. She was younger than Elena expected, maybe 40, with sharp eyes and the bearing of someone who'd spent years uncovering secrets people wanted to stay hidden. She looked at the stack of files on the conference table and then at Marco. This is real? She asked. Not fabricated? Not exaggerated? Every word is documented and verified. You'll have access to sources willing to go on record, financial documents that prove money laundering, testimony from victims. Marco leaned back. I'm giving you the story of the decade, Rachel. But I need you to move fast. Print edition tomorrow morning, digital edition tonight. That's impossible. I need time to verify sources, get legal clearance. You have 12 hours. After that, Giovanni Vittorio will realize what's coming and either kill you to stop publication or disappear where you can't find him. Marco's tone was flat. I'm not asking you to trust me. I'm giving you verifiable information and letting you decide if the story is worth the risk. Rachel spent the next hour reviewing documents, her expression growing more intense with each page. Finally, she looked up. I'll need to bring in my editor and our legal team. If we're going to publish this fast, we need to be bulletproof. Done. Vincent will escort them here within the hour. They work from this location until publication. I can't risk anyone leaking this to Giovanni before it goes live. By 4 in the morning, the Free Press team had taken over half the penthouse. Editors, lawyers, fact-checkers, all working frantically to prepare a story that would rock Detroit to its foundations. Elena watched from the bedroom, feeling like she was witnessing history being made, or a catastrophic mistake. She wasn't sure which yet. Marco found her there around dawn, exhaustion evident in every line of his body. He collapsed beside her on the bed, still fully dressed. "It's happening," he said. "Rachel's running with it. Digital edition goes live in 3 hours. Print hits the streets by 7. By noon, Giovanni Vittorio will be the most hated man in Detroit." And then what? Then he either runs or fights. If he runs, Sarah Chen's federal warrants are ready. He won't make it out of the state. If he fights... Marco turned his head to look at her. "If he fights, we'd better be ready for everything." Elena curled into his side, her hand finding his. "Are we doing the right thing? Those men who died, is this what they would have wanted? I don't know, but I know I can't let their deaths be meaningless. We're all in now, Elena. No turning back." They lay there in silence as the sun rose over Detroit, neither of them sleeping despite the exhaustion. At 7:30, Marco's phone started ringing. Calls from associates, business partners, even rivals, all wanting to know if he'd seen the morning paper. The headline was stark and brutal. "Detroit's Shadow King, Inside Giovanni Vittorio's Criminal Empire." Rachel Morrison had written a masterpiece. The story detailed every aspect of Giovanni's operations, named names, provided documentation. She'd included photographs of victims, testimony from survivors, financial records that proved the scope of his corruption. It was comprehensive, devastating, and absolutely true. By 8 o'clock, the story had gone viral. Every news outlet in the state was covering it. Federal officials were issuing statements about ongoing investigations. Politicians Giovanni had paid off were scrambling to distance themselves. His legitimate business partners were severing ties, and Giovanni Vittorio, the man himself, had gone silent. "He's planning something," Vincent said, arriving with the latest intelligence. "All his known locations are empty. His people are hunkered down, waiting for orders. It's too quiet." "How long until he moves?" Marco asked. "Hours, maybe less. He knows we're the source of the leak. There's no way to hide that. And he knows where we are." Vincent's expression was grim. "We should evacuate Elena. Get her somewhere safe before this gets ugly." "No." Elena spoke before Marco could. "I'm staying. We agreed. We face this together." "Elena, this isn't a negotiation anymore. When Giovanni comes, it's going to be with overwhelming force. This building can withstand a lot, but..." Vincent hesitated. "I can't guarantee your safety, or the baby's." "I don't care about guarantees. I care about not running while Marco fights alone." Elena looked at Marco, seeing the internal struggle on his face. "Don't ask me to leave, please." Marco was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. "She stays. But Vincent, I want her in the secure room if things go bad. The one with the separate exit to the underground garage. Already prepped and stocked. She can hold out there for days if necessary." The morning dissolved into tense waiting. Sarah Chen called to confirm that federal warrants had been issued for Giovanni's arrest on 12 counts, including murder, racketeering, and witness intimidation. But Giovanni was nowhere to be found. Every known property had been abandoned, every contact had gone dark. "He's gathering his forces," Thomas reported around 11. "We've got intel suggesting he's calling in favors from other families, pulling in outside contractors. He's building an army." "For what? He has to know he can't win this. The story's out, the warrants are issued, he's finished." David looked confused. "He doesn't care about winning anymore," Marco said quietly. "He cares about revenge, about sending a message that you don't cross Giovanni Vittorio without pain and blood." "So what's his play?" "He comes here. He tries to kill me, tries to kill Elena, burns everything I've built to the ground. Then he disappears, either underground or into a grave. Either way, he gets his revenge." Marco's voice was calm, analytical. "It's what I'd do in his position." Elena felt ice in her veins. "When?" "Today. Probably soon. He won't wait. Every hour that passes, the federal net tightens. He has one chance to hit us before he loses the resources to do it." As if summoned by the prediction, alarms began blaring throughout the building. Vincent was on his phone immediately, his face going pale as he listened to the report. "They're here," he announced. 30 vehicles minimum, approaching from multiple directions. They've got heavy weapons, RPGs, maybe worse. We've got 5 minutes until they're in position. Marco was already moving, issuing rapid-fire commands. "All non-essential personnel to the basement bunker. Combat teams to positions. Someone get Sarah Chen on the line. I want federal agents here now." He turned to Elena. "Time to go to the secure room." "Marco, come now, Elena, please." His voice cracked slightly. "I need to know you're safe. I need to focus on keeping everyone alive, and I can't do that if I'm worried about you." Elena wanted to argue, but the building shuddered with the first impact, something heavy hitting the lower floors. The time for discussion was over. Vincent grabbed her arm, already pulling her toward the hidden panel that concealed the entrance to the secure room. Marco kissed her once, hard and desperate, then pushed her toward Vincent. "Keep her safe," Marco ordered. "With my life," Vincent promised. The secure room was exactly that. A reinforced cell built into the building's core, with its own air supply, communications, and emergency exit. Vincent sealed her inside, the heavy door closing with a hiss of hydraulics. "I'll be right outside," he said through the intercom. "If anything gets past us, you use the exit tunnel. It leads to the underground garage. There's a vehicle waiting, keys in the ignition. You drive north, don't stop until you hit the Canadian border. Understood?" "Vincent, I'm not leaving Marco." "Yes, you are. If it comes to that, you are. Because that baby you're carrying is his daughter, and she needs to survive even if we don't." Vincent's voice was firm. "Promise me, Elena. Promise you'll run if it comes to it." Elena closed her eyes, one hand on her belly. "I promise." The building shook with another impact, this one closer. Through the secure room's monitors, Elena could see multiple feeds of the building's exterior. Black SUVs had formed a perimeter, and men were pouring out, dozens of them, all armed, all moving with military precision. Giovanni had brought his army. The siege had begun. For the next hour, Elena watched helplessly as war erupted around Marco's building. Giovanni's forces attacked from multiple angles, trying to breach the reinforced entrances. Marco's security held them off, but barely. The sound of gunfire was constant, punctuated by explosions that made the entire structure tremble. Through the chaos, Elena spotted Marco on one of the monitors. He was on the penthouse level coordinating the defense, his expression cold and focused. She watched him direct his men, watched him pick up a weapon himself when the fighting got close. This was Marco in his element, the dangerous man she'd married, the one who'd built an empire through violence and will. And she understood, finally, what loving him really meant. It meant accepting all of him, not just the gentle husband who held her at night, but the killer who would burn the world to protect his family. It meant standing beside him knowing that any day could be their last. It meant being strong enough to survive in his world, or brave enough to pull him out of it. The building shuddered with another massive impact, and alarms began shrieking. Through the monitors, Elena saw flames spreading on the lower floors. "They've breached the east entrance," Vincent's voice crackled through the intercom. "Marco's falling back to the penthouse with the remaining security. Elena, get ready. We might need to evacuate." "What about Marco?" "He's not leaving. He's making a stand." Of course he was. Marco didn't run. That wasn't who he was. He'd stay and fight until the end, regardless of the cost. Elena made a decision. She moved to the secure room's exit, the tunnel Vincent had mentioned. But instead of preparing to flee, she started studying the route. If it led to the garage, it might also provide a way back up to other parts of the building, a way to reach Marco. The baby kicked hard, as if protesting the forming plan. Elena pressed her hand to her belly. "I know," she whispered. "I know it's crazy, but I can't leave him. I won't." She opened the tunnel door and started walking, leaving safety behind, heading back into the war to find the man she loved. Because if they were going to fall, they'd fall together. The tunnel was dimly lit and narrow, forcing Elena to move carefully despite her urgency. Her 8-month belly made navigation difficult, and every few steps she had to pause, one hand against the concrete wall, breathing through the exertion. The baby protested the activity with sharp kicks that stole Elena's breath. "I'm sorry," she whispered to her daughter. "I'm so sorry. But I can't let your father die alone." The tunnel branched at several points, and Elena had to guess which direction led back toward the main building rather than toward the garage exit. She chose based on instinct and the sound of gunfire, moving toward the chaos rather than away from it, every maternal instinct screaming at her to turn back even as she pushed forward. Above her, the building continued to shake with impacts. Dust rained down from the ceiling with each explosion, and twice Elena had to crouch low as debris fell. She was terrified of getting trapped down here, of dying in the dark where no one would find her, but the alternative, running while Marco fought, was unthinkable. She reached a service elevator she hadn't known existed, its doors marked with faded maintenance warnings. The panel beside it was dead, the building's power clearly compromised, but there was a manual override. Elena grabbed the emergency crank and began turning it, her muscles burning with the effort. The doors opened reluctantly, revealing a dark shaft. For a moment, Elena considered trying to climb. Then she saw the maintenance ladder attached to the shaft wall and realized she'd have to. 8 months pregnant, exhausted, terrified, but there was no other way up. She grabbed the first rung and started climbing. Every floor was agony. Elena's arms shook with the strain, her breathing came in gasps, and the baby kicked constantly as if trying to force her to stop. But Elena kept climbing, driven by a certainty that if she stopped, if she turned back, she'd lose Marco forever. She'd climbed 6 floors when she heard voices echoing down the shaft, men shouting in Italian, the heavy footsteps of people moving fast. Giovanni's men had made it inside. Elena froze, pressing herself against the ladder, praying they wouldn't look down the shaft. "Second team to the penthouse," someone barked. "Giovanni wants DeLuca alive if possible. Everyone else is expendable." The voices faded as they moved past. Elena waited until silence returned, then continued climbing. Her hands were bleeding now, the rough metal rungs tearing through skin, but she couldn't stop. Not when she was this close. The 10th floor access door was locked, and the 11th. But the 12th floor door yielded when Elena threw her weight against it, sending her stumbling into a hallway thick with smoke. She recognized this level. It was 2 floors below the penthouse, where Marco's private offices were located. Gunfire erupted somewhere close, making Elena duck instinctively. She pressed against the wall, trying to orient herself through the chaos. The hallway was empty, but showed signs of recent fighting, bullet holes in the walls, blood on the carpet, spent shell casings scattered like confetti. Elena moved toward the stairwell, the only route up to the penthouse now that the elevators were down. She'd made it 3 steps when a hand grabbed her from behind, spinning her around. Vincent stared at her with a mixture of fury and disbelief. "What the hell are you doing here? You were supposed to be in the secure room." "I couldn't leave him. Where's Marco?" "Penthouse, holding the main entrance with about 12 men. We've lost nearly half our force, and Giovanni's people keep coming." Vincent's face was streaked with soot and blood, a cut above his eyebrow still bleeding. "Elena, you need to go back. If they get through, then I want to be with Marco when it happens." Elena's voice was steady despite her fear. "I'm not running, Vincent. Not anymore." Vincent looked like he wanted to argue, but another explosion rocked the building, this one close enough to knock them both off balance. He caught Elena's arm, steadying her. "Fine. But you stay behind me, and if I tell you to run, you run. Understood?" Elena nodded. Vincent pulled a handgun from his belt and handed it to her. "Safety's here. You point and shoot. Don't think about it. Just do it if you have to." The weight of the weapon in Elena's hand was surreal. 2 years ago, she'd never touched a gun. Now she was holding one while 8 months pregnant, preparing to fight her way to her husband through a war zone. Life had a dark sense of humor. They made it up 1 flight of stairs before encountering resistance. 2 of Giovanni's men were guarding the landing, and they raised their weapons the instant they saw Vincent and Elena. Vincent fired first, 2 quick shots that dropped both men before Elena could even process what was happening. "Keep moving," Vincent ordered, stepping over the bodies. Elena followed, trying not to look at the dead men, trying not to think about the fact that she was now part of this violence, whether she wanted to be or not. They climbed another floor, the sounds of fighting growing louder. The penthouse level was a battlefield. Marco's men had erected barricades from furniture and were holding a defensive position around the main entrance. Bodies littered the floor, both Marco's people and Giovanni's. The air was thick with gunpowder and smoke, and somewhere an alarm was still shrieking uselessly. Marco stood behind the central barricade, reloading his weapon with mechanical efficiency. He looked up as Vincent and Elena emerged from the stairwell, and his expression transformed from focused determination to absolute horror. "Elena?" He crossed to them in 3 long strides, grabbing her shoulders. "What are you? You were supposed to be safe." "I'm exactly where I need to be." Elena met his eyes. "With you." "This is insane. You're 8 months pregnant. We're under siege." "I know all that. I chose to be here anyway." Elena's voice was firm. "Now stop wasting time arguing and tell me how I can help." Marco looked like he might explode, but Vincent intervened. "Boss, we don't have time for this. Giovanni's regrouping for another push. We've got maybe 5 minutes." Marco's jaw clenched, but he nodded. He pulled Elena behind the barricade, positioning her in the most protected spot. "You stay here. Don't move. Don't take risks. If they breach this position, Vincent gets you out through the emergency exit. No arguments." "No arguments," Elena agreed, though they both knew it was a lie. The 5-minute reprieve lasted 3. Giovanni's forces hit them with everything they had, a coordinated assault from multiple angles that nearly overwhelmed Marco's defenses. Elena watched her husband fight with a cold precision that was terrifying and magnificent, each movement calculated, each shot placed with deadly accuracy. But they were outnumbered and outgunned. For every attacker Marco's men dropped, 2 more appeared. The barricade was slowly being pushed back, the defensive perimeter shrinking. "We can't hold this," Vincent shouted over the gunfire. "Marco, we need to fall back to the inner office. It's more defensible." "Do it! Everyone back now!" The retreat was controlled chaos. Marco's remaining men, 8 now, maybe 9, fell back through a reinforced door into Marco's private office. Vincent hauled Elena through, Marco bringing up the rear, laying down covering fire until the door was sealed. The office was smaller but built like a vault. Bulletproof windows, reinforced walls, a security door that could withstand sustained assault. It was designed to be Marco's last stand if it ever came to that. It had come to that. "How long can we hold?" Marco asked, checking his ammunition. "Hour, maybe 2 if we're lucky." Vincent was doing the same calculation. "But then what? We can't stay here forever." "Federal agents are en route," one of Marco's men reported. "Sarah Chen got through to them. ETA 20 minutes. 20 minutes might as well be 20 hours. Marco looked around at his remaining force, exhausted, wounded, running low on everything. His eyes found Elena, and the anguish in them nearly broke her heart. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I brought you into this. You didn't bring me anywhere. I chose this. I chose you." Elena moved to him, taking his face in her hands. "And I'd choose you again, every time." The moment was shattered by a new voice, amplified and coming from outside the office. "Marco De Luca!" Giovanni Vittorio's cultured tones echoed through the penthouse. "I know you can hear me. Let's talk like civilized men." Marco's expression turned to stone. He moved to the door's intercom. "Nothing to talk about, Giovanni. You're finished. The story's out. The warrants are issued. Kill me and you're just adding another charge." "Perhaps, but I'll die satisfied knowing I destroyed you first." Giovanni's laugh was cold. "You broke the rules, Marco. You went to the press, exposed our world to outsiders. That kind of betrayal can't go unanswered." "You threatened my family. You killed my men. You started this war. And I'm going to finish it. But I'm a reasonable man, so I'm offering you a choice." Giovanni paused for effect. "Send out Elena, and I let everyone else live. You, your men, everyone. She's all I want." The office went completely silent. Every eye turned to Elena, then to Marco. His face had gone white with rage. "Never," Marco said flatly. "You'll never touch her." "Then everyone dies, including that baby she's carrying. Is your pride really worth all those lives, Marco?" Elena watched Marco struggle, saw the calculation in his eyes. He was actually considering it, not because he'd give her up, but because he was trying to find an angle, a way to turn Giovanni's offer into a trap. "No," Elena said quietly. She moved to the intercom before Marco could stop her. "Giovanni, this is Elena. I'll come out. But you let everyone else go first. I see them walk out of this building alive, then I'm yours." "Elena, no!" Marco grabbed her arm, pulling her away from the intercom. "Absolutely not. I won't let you." It's not your choice. Elena kept her voice steady. This is the only way everyone survives. You know it is. I don't care. I'll die before I let him take you. And our daughter? You'll let her die too? Because that's what happens if we stay here, Marco. We all die, or I make a deal. Elena touched his face. Let me do this. Let me save you. Marco was shaking his head, his eyes bright with unshed tears. I can't. Elena, I can't lose you again. You won't. I promise you won't. Elena turned back to the intercom. Giovanni, we have a deal. Start releasing Marco's men. Elena, stop! Marco tried to reach for the intercom, but Elena held firm. Giovanni's response was immediate. Smart woman. Send out Marco's men one at a time. Once they're all clear, you walk out. And Elena, no tricks. I see any weapons, anyone tries anything clever, and I kill everyone. Elena looked at Marco's remaining men. Go. All of you. That's an order. Boss? Vincent looked to Marco, who was standing rigid, his fists clenched. Marco, please. Elena's voice broke. Please let them go. Don't make their deaths meaningless. For a long moment, Marco didn't move. Then, slowly, he nodded. Go. Everyone out. That's an order. The men filed out reluctantly, each one looking back as they left. Vincent was the last, and he stopped in front of Elena. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you better, he said quietly. You did everything you could. Take care of him after I'm gone. You're not going anywhere. Vincent's voice was fierce. We're getting you back. I promise. Then he was gone, and Elena was alone with Marco in the office. Through the bulletproof windows, she could see Giovanni's men gathering in the penthouse, weapons trained on the door, waiting. Marco pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly it hurt. I won't let this happen. I'll find a way. There is no other way. Elena pulled back to look at him. But Marco, listen to me. This isn't over. Giovanni thinks he's winning, but he's making a mistake. The federal agents are coming, his organization is exposed. He's committed to this building with his entire force. He's trapped himself. That doesn't help you. It means you'll get me back. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but you'll find me. And when you do, Elena pressed something into his hand, the emergency beacon he'd given her, disguised as a compact. You'll know exactly where I am. I kept this. I'll activate it as soon as I can. Marco stared at the device, then at Elena, hope and despair warring in his expression. You planned this. You knew you were going to offer yourself. I planned for the possibility, because I know you, Marco. I know you'd try to save everyone even if it cost you everything, so I made sure there was another option. Elena kissed him, pouring everything she felt into it. I love you. I'm doing this because I love you and our daughter, and I need you both to survive. Elena, no more arguments, no more time. Elena stepped back, straightening her shoulders. When you come for me, and you will come for me, bring everything. Don't hold back, don't play by rules. You destroy Giovanni Vittorio completely. Promise me. I promise. Marco's voice was raw. I'll burn down the world to get you back. Good. Elena moved to the door, then paused. And Marco? Name her something strong. Something that means fighter or survivor, because she's going to need to be both. Then she opened the door and walked out into the ruined penthouse. Giovanni Vittorio stood in the center of the destruction, looking exactly as polished and composed as he had at the cafe. He smiled as Elena approached, as if they were meeting for lunch rather than in the aftermath of a battle. Elena, I'm glad you chose wisdom over pride. His eyes flicked to her belly. For the baby's sake, if nothing else. Let Marco's men go, Elena said. You gave your word. And I'm a man of my word. Giovanni nodded to his people, and Elena watched through the windows as Marco's men were escorted out of the building. Vincent was the last to leave, and he looked back once, his expression promising violence. Now me, Giovanni said, offering his arm like a gentleman. We have much to discuss about your future. Elena didn't take his arm. I'm not your guest. I'm your hostage. Let's not pretend otherwise. Giovanni's smile widened. Direct. I appreciate that. Come along then, hostage. We have a car waiting. They moved through the destroyed penthouse, past bodies and debris. Elena kept her hand on her belly, feeling her daughter's agitated movements. She didn't look back at the office where Marco waited, didn't let herself think about whether she'd ever see him again. The building's main entrance had been blown open, the security doors hanging useless on their hinges. Giovanni's men formed a protective corridor as they descended, weapons ready for any threat. But Marco's men were already gone, and no resistance came. A black SUV waited at street level, its engine running. Giovanni guided Elena into the back seat, sliding in beside her. Two of his men took the front seats, and the vehicle pulled away from the building immediately. Through the windows, Elena could see the destruction, bullet holes in walls, shattered glass, the building that had been Marco's fortress now smoking and damaged. In the distance, sirens wailed. The federal response Marco had been counting on, arriving too late. "Where are you taking me?" Elena asked. "Somewhere safe, somewhere your devoted husband will have difficulty finding you." Giovanni seemed pleased with himself. "I have a private plane waiting at a small airfield. We'll be out of the country before the authorities even know where to look." "And then what? You think Marco won't find me? You think he'll stop looking?" "I think Marco will be too busy trying to salvage what's left of his organization to mount a rescue operation. And if he does find you," Giovanni shrugged. "Well, negotiations can be conducted from anywhere. I'm patient." The SUV wound through Detroit's streets, avoiding main roads. Elena tried to memorize the route, looking for landmarks, anything that might help later. They passed the financial district, then the warehouse area, heading toward the industrial outskirts. The baby kicked hard, a painful jab that made Elena gasp. Giovanni glanced at her with something that might have been concern. "When are you due?" 3 weeks? We'll need to arrange medical care. I'm not a monster, Elena. You and the child will be well treated as long as you cooperate." "Cooperate with what exactly?" "Information. Marco's operations, his contacts, his financial arrangements. Everything you know about how he runs his organization." Giovanni's tone was conversational. "In return, you and your daughter live comfortably. Eventually, when the situation stabilizes, we might even discuss your release." "You're delusional if you think I'd betray Marco." "We'll see. People become remarkably cooperative when their children's welfare is at stake." Giovanni smiled. "But we don't need to discuss that now. We have time." They reached the airfield, a small private strip on the city's edge, far from commercial traffic. A sleek jet waited on the tarmac, its stairs already deployed. Giovanni's men moved into position, securing the area. Elena was helped from the SUV, her body protesting after the climb through the elevator shaft and the stress of the past hours. She felt exhausted and sore, her back aching, her hands still bleeding from the ladder rungs. They were halfway to the plane when the first black sedan appeared at the airfield entrance. Then another, and another. Federal vehicles, a dozen of them, moving fast and blocking all exits. Agents poured out, weapons drawn, voices shouting commands. Giovanni froze, his expression transforming from smug confidence to shock. "How did they—" "Sarah Chen." Elena felt relief flood through her. She knew about this airfield. Marco must have told her where you'd go. "Move!" Giovanni grabbed Elena's arm, dragging her toward the plane. "Get to the aircraft now!" But federal agents were already surrounding the plane, cutting off that escape. Giovanni's men raised their weapons, and for a horrible moment, Elena thought they'd start shooting with her caught in the middle. Then a voice echoed across the airfield through a bullhorn. "Giovanni Vittorio, you are surrounded. Release the hostage and surrender. This is your only opportunity." Giovanni's grip on Elena's arm tightened painfully. She could see the calculation in his eyes, the desperation of a man watching his empire collapse in real time. "You're my ticket out," he hissed, pulling Elena against him as a shield. "Tell them to back off, or—" He didn't finish the threat. Elena felt something wet and warm on her legs, a sudden gush that soaked through her dress. For a moment she thought she'd been shot, that Giovanni had somehow stabbed her. Then the realization hit with the force of a freight train. Her water had broken. "No," Elena whispered. "No, not now. It's too early." But her body didn't care about timing. A contraction seized her, so intense it drove her to her knees despite Giovanni's grip. She cried out, one hand clutching her belly, the other scrabbling for support. Giovanni released her instinctively, stepping back. Elena collapsed onto the tarmac, gasping through the pain. "She's in labor!" someone shouted. Federal agents surged forward, surrounding Elena protectively. She caught fragmentary glimpses, Giovanni being forced to the ground, his men surrendering, someone calling for medical assistance. Then Marco was there. Somehow. Impossibly. He dropped to his knees beside her, his hands on her face. "I've got you," he said. "I've got you. You're safe." "The baby," Elena managed between gasps. "Marco, it's too early." "Ambulance is on the way. Just breathe, Elena. Stay with me." Another contraction hit, worse than the first. Elena's vision sparked at the edges, pain overwhelming everything else. She heard Marco talking to her, felt his hands holding hers, but the words didn't make sense anymore. Through the haze of pain, Elena saw federal agents loading Giovanni into a vehicle, saw Vincent running toward them, saw Sarah Chen speaking urgently into a phone. Then the ambulance arrived, and there were paramedics, and someone was checking her vitals, while Marco refused to let go of her hand. 3 centimeters dilated, a paramedic announced. "We need to get her to the hospital now. Sir, you'll have to—" "I'm not leaving her," Marco said flatly. "Then get in the ambulance. Move." Elena was lifted onto a stretcher, Marco climbing in beside her. The ambulance doors slammed shut and they were moving, sirens wailing. Another contraction seized her, and Elena screamed, her body trying to expel a baby that was too small, too early, not ready. "Something's wrong," she gasped. "Marco, something's wrong." The lead paramedic was checking monitors, her expression concerned. "Blood pressure's spiking. I'm seeing signs of preeclampsia. We need to get her to the OR. She might need an emergency C-section." "Do whatever you have to do," Marco said. "Just save them both." The ambulance ride was a blur of pain and fear. Elena drifted in and out of consciousness, each contraction dragging her under. She heard Marco's voice, constant and steady, anchoring her to reality. "Stay with me, Elena. Our daughter needs you. I need you. Please stay with me." "Trying," Elena whispered. "I'm trying." The hospital materialized around them, bright lights, rushing nurses, orders being shouted. Elena was wheeled into an operating room, Marco running beside the gurney until someone stopped him at the door. "You can't come in until we stabilize her," a doctor said firmly. "We'll update you as soon as we can." The last thing Elena saw before the doors closed was Marco's face, devastated and terrified, watching her disappear. Then there were only the lights and the doctors and the pain. Time became meaningless. Elena heard voices discussing her vitals, felt hands on her belly, registered the sharp prick of an IV. Someone gave her something for the pain, and the world softened at the edges. "We're going to do a C-section," a doctor announced. "The baby's in distress, and Elena's preeclampsia is severe. We can't wait." Elena tried to speak, to ask questions, but her tongue felt thick and useless. She felt pressure on her abdomen, strange pulling sensations, but no pain. The medication had done its job. Then, a sound. Weak and reedy at first, then stronger. A baby crying. "It's a girl," someone announced. "Small but breathing on her own. NICU team, she's all yours." Elena tried to see her daughter, tried to lift her head, but exhaustion and medication held her down. She caught a glimpse of something small and red being rushed to an incubator, heard continued crying that meant her daughter was alive. "Elena, you did it." Dr. Chen was there suddenly, her face appearing in Elena's field of vision. "Your daughter is here, and she's fighting. Now we need to take care of you." The surgery continued for what felt like hours. Elena drifted in and out, occasionally surfacing to hear updates, blood pressure stabilizing, bleeding under control. She's going to make it. Finally, it was over. Elena was wheeled to recovery, every part of her body screaming with exhaustion and trauma. But she was alive, and her daughter was alive. And that was all that mattered. Marco was waiting in the recovery room, looking like he'd aged 10 years in the past few hours. He stood immediately as Elena was brought in, crossing to her side and taking her hand so gently it brought tears to her eyes. "Our daughter?" Elena asked, her voice hoarse. "She's in the NICU, 4 pounds, 6 ounces. Small, but the doctors say she's strong. They're monitoring her breathing and temperature, but she's stable. Marco's voice cracked. You did it, Elena. You saved everyone, and you gave us a daughter. Can I see her? Soon. They want you to rest first, let the anesthesia wear off. But soon, I promise. Elena closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the past weeks finally lifting. Giovanni. In federal custody. They charged him with everything. The murders, the siege, kidnapping you. Sarah Chen says he'll never see the outside of a prison again. Marco kissed her forehead. It's over, Elena. We won. We survived, Elena corrected. That's different than winning. Maybe, but we're together. Our daughter is alive, and we have a future. That's enough for me. 3 hours later, after Elena had been cleared by doctors and transferred to a private room, she finally got to meet her daughter. The NICU nurses wheeled in an incubator, and Elena's first real look at her child stole her breath. She was tiny, almost impossibly small, with dark hair and delicate features that were clearly Marco's. She was hooked up to monitors and IVs, but her eyes were open, and when Elena reached into the incubator to touch her hand, tiny fingers wrapped around her finger with surprising strength. She's perfect, Elena whispered. She's a fighter, like her mother. Marco stood beside the incubator, his expression full of wonder and fear. Have you thought about names? Elena had been considering this since the ambulance, since she'd told Marco to choose something strong. Vittoria, she said, it means victory. And considering what we went through to bring her into the world, Vittoria De Luca. Marco tested the name, then smiled. Perfect. Over the next week, Elena recovered while Vittoria grew stronger in the NICU. The doctors were amazed by how quickly the baby progressed. Within days, she was breathing entirely on her own, her temperature stable, her weight starting to climb. She's definitely her mother's daughter, Dr. Chen said during one checkup. Stubborn, strong, refusing to let anything keep her down. Marco barely left the hospital, dividing his time between Elena's room and the NICU. Vincent managed what was left of the organization from outside, coordinating repairs to the building and dealing with the aftermath of Giovanni's siege. Sarah Chen visited on the 4th day, bringing news and paperwork. Giovanni's organization has completely collapsed, she reported. With him in custody and his top lieutenants either dead or cooperating for plea deals, there's nobody left to hold it together. Detroit's criminal landscape is going to be very different going forward. And Marco's legal situation? Elena asked. Protected witness status in exchange for his testimony against Giovanni and cooperation in related investigations. Not immunity, he'll still answer for some things, but he won't see prison time. Sarah looked at Marco. You're getting a second chance. I suggest you use it wisely. I intend to. Marco's voice was firm. No more territory wars. No more violence. I'm stepping back from active management, putting legitimate people in charge of the legal businesses, and slowly divesting from everything else. That's going to take years, Sarah said. I have years. And a daughter to raise who deserves a father who doesn't run a criminal empire. Marco looked at Vittoria in her incubator. She's going to grow up different, better. By the 10th day, Vittoria had graduated from the NICU to a regular bassinet in Elena's room. She weighed 5 pounds now, feeding well, sleeping in reasonable patterns. The doctors cleared both of them for discharge with instructions for home care and follow-up appointments. The penthouse had been repaired in their absence, the damage from the siege erased as if it had never happened. But Marco had made changes. The entire floor had been converted into a family space, nursery adjacent to the master bedroom, soft colors replacing harsh ones, every sharp edge padded or removed. I know we need to talk about the future, Marco said as they settled Vittoria into her crib that first night home. About us, about what comes next. We do, Elena agreed. She'd been thinking about this constantly during the hospital stay. I love you, Marco. I probably never stopped, but I can't live the way we did before, me sheltered and ignorant while you make all the decisions. I don't want that either. I want a real partnership. You said it yourself, partners pull their weight, share the burden, face things together. Marco took her hands. So here's what I'm proposing. We get remarried, but this time it's different. You have full access to everything, finances, business operations, security arrangements. Anything I do, any decision I make, You know about it. Complete transparency. And the criminal elements? The dangerous parts you can't just walk away from immediately? We dismantle them together. You help me decide what to keep, what to sell, how to transition everything to legitimate operations. It'll take time, maybe years, but we do it as a team. Marco's expression was serious. I won't lie and say there's no risk. I've made enemies, and some grudges last a lifetime, but I'll never hide the danger from you again. You deserve to know what you're walking into. Elena considered this, weighing it against everything they'd been through. I have conditions. Name them. 1. We move out of this building, find somewhere less conspicuous, more like a home than a fortress. 2. Vittoria grows up with as much normalcy as we can manage. Regular school, real friends, a life that isn't defined by your past. And 3. Elena paused. You teach me everything, not just how to shoot a gun or spot a tail, everything about how your world works, so I'm never vulnerable again. Done, done, and done. Marco pulled her close. Anything else? Therapy. For both of us. We've been through trauma, and we're going to be parents. We need to deal with our damage before we pass it on to our daughter. Marco actually laughed at that. 6 months ago, if someone told me I'd be agreeing to couples therapy, I'd have thought they were insane. But yes, if that's what you need, then absolutely. It's what we both need. Elena kissed him softly. I want this to work, Marco. I want us to build something real and lasting. But we have to be honest with each other. Always. Always, he promised. They were married again 6 weeks later in a small ceremony at the hospital chapel, just Vincent and Dr. Chen as witnesses, Vittoria sleeping in Elena's arms throughout the brief vows. It was nothing like their first wedding, which had been large and lavish and attended by people who'd later become enemies. This time, it was intimate and genuine, two people choosing each other with full knowledge of what that choice meant. The rebuilding took time, just as Marco had predicted. Elena became his partner in every sense, learning the intricacies of his various businesses, meeting with lawyers and accountants, making decisions about which operations to keep and which to dissolve. She discovered she had a talent for the legitimate side: real estate investment, import-export logistics, financial management. The criminal elements they dismantled gradually, carefully, making deals and paying off debts until Marco's empire had transformed into something that wouldn't destroy their daughter's future. It wasn't perfect. There were still threats, still moments of danger when old enemies resurfaced or new conflicts emerged. But they faced everything together, Elena no longer sheltered but actively involved in protecting their family. Vittoria thrived, growing from a tiny NICU baby into a healthy, curious toddler with her mother's determination and her father's intensity. She took her first steps in the new house they'd bought, a sprawling property in the suburbs with a normal neighborhood and good schools nearby. She said mama first, then dada, and by 18 months was speaking in full sentences that usually consisted of questions about everything she saw. On Vittoria's second birthday, Elena stood in their backyard watching Marco push their daughter on a swing set, her laughter ringing out clear and joyful. It was such a normal scene, father and daughter playing in the sunshine, not a bodyguard in sight, no hidden threats or ulterior motives. Vincent joined Elena on the patio, handing her a glass of lemonade. Hard to believe it's been 2 years since the siege, he said. Sometimes it feels like yesterday. Other times it feels like a different life entirely. Elena sipped her drink. How are things in the city? Quiet. Surprisingly so. Giovanni's conviction sent a message. Cooperation with authorities pays better than loyalty to a sinking ship. Most of the old families have either gone legitimate or left town. Detroit's actually peaceful. Vincent shook his head. Never thought I'd see the day. And you? What's next for you? Vincent had been Marco's second for 15 years, his life built around violence and strategy. But he smiled now, something softer in his expression. Thinking about retirement, maybe open that restaurant I always talked about. Marco doesn't need a war consigliere anymore. He needs a business advisor, and that's not my strength. You'll always have a place with us, Elena said. You saved my life more than once. That doesn't get forgotten. I know, but it's time. For all of us. Vincent gestured to Marco and Vittoria. Look at him. That's not the same man who used to rule Detroit through fear. That's a father who coaches Little League and goes to PTA meetings. You changed him, Elena. Gave him something worth changing for. Elena watched her husband lift their daughter high in the air, her giggles infectious. He changed too. Chose to be different. I just gave him a reason to want it. That evening, after Vittoria had been put to bed and the house had grown quiet, Elena found Marco in his office. He was reviewing legitimate business contracts, nothing more sinister than import agreements and property leases. Remember when your office used to terrify me? Elena said from the doorway. All those files and secrets, knowing you were making decisions that affected people's lives. And now? Now it's just paperwork. Boring, normal paperwork. Elena moved to sit on his desk. I like boring. Marco smiled, setting aside his work to pull her into his lap. Liar, you'd be bored out of your mind if things were completely normal. Maybe a little, Elena admitted. But I'll take boring over being shot at any day. Fair point. Marco's arms wrapped around her waist. I have something for you. Was going to wait for our anniversary, but he pulled out a small box from his desk drawer. I figured now works. Inside was a pendant, a delicate piece showing a phoenix rising from flames, crafted in white gold with tiny diamond details. It's beautiful, Elena breathed. It's us. We burned down, rose up, built something new from the ashes. Marco fastened it around her neck. 2 years ago, I thought I'd lost you forever. Now you're here, Vittoria's here, we have a life that's actually worth living. That's everything, Elena. You're everything. Elena kissed him, slow and deep, pouring 2 years of love and struggle and triumph into it. When they finally broke apart, she whispered, I'm pregnant again. Marco went completely still. What? Found out this morning. About 6 weeks along, if the test is accurate. Thought you should know before we start planning our future. It's going to include another baby. The expression on Marco's face cycled through shock, joy, fear, and back to joy. Another one. We're having another baby. If you're happy about it, I know we talked about waiting longer. I'm thrilled. Marco stood, lifting Elena with him and spinning her around. Absolutely thrilled. Vittoria gets a sibling. We get another chance to do this right from the start. This is... He set her down carefully, suddenly worried. Are you happy? Do you want this? I want this. Want our family to grow, want more late nights and early mornings, and all the chaos that comes with kids. Elena touched his face. I want a life with you, Marco. The whole messy, complicated, beautiful thing. Then that's what we'll have. Marco kissed her forehead. A real life. A normal life. Or as normal as we can manage. Normal is overrated anyway, Elena said with a smile. They stood there in the quiet office, holding each other, thinking about the future that spread before them like an unwritten page. It wouldn't be perfect. Nothing ever was. There would be challenges, complications, moments when the past tried to drag them back down. But they'd face it all together, partners in the truest sense, building something that would last. Outside, Detroit glittered in the darkness, a city transformed by the choices they'd made and the wars they'd ended. Somewhere in that sprawling urban landscape, other stories were unfolding, other lives intersecting with violence and chance and fate. But in this house, in this moment, there was peace, hard-won and precious, built on sacrifice and second chances, sustained by love that had survived everything thrown against it. Elena DeLuca, no longer more, never again alone, rested her head against her husband's chest and listened to the steady beat of his heart. In the nursery down the hall, their daughter slept soundly. Inside her, new life was growing. They had fallen from safety into chaos, fought through darkness to find each other again, and emerged not unscathed but unbroken. The future remained uncertain, but they would face it as they'd faced everything else, together. And that was enough.